After 12:30, we'll call to order the September 24, 2025 meeting of the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency Board of Directors. Ask everyone to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please. Yes.
Director Long is absent. Director Mulhart.
Here.
Director Caviezel.
Present.
Director Jim.
Here.
All right, thank you. Agenda review. Any proposed changes to the agenda?
Make a suggestion that we move agenda item 19, hearing, to the very end of the open session, in the interest of allowing others who don't have an interest in that particular hearing to either log off or exit.
Any objection? All right, that's where we will move that item. Public comments. At this time, anyone wishing to address the board on matters not otherwise on today's agenda is welcome to do so. Just come forward and identify yourselves. All right, hearing no voices and seeing no movement, we'll move on to executive officer comments.
Executive officer comments are written. The item I wanted to call attention to was the meeting of the what we're calling the Ad Hoc Variance Committee. Preliminary meeting, much more work to follow, but I, again, wanted to highlight that we have restarted the process of reviewing variances. We're coming up with some methodology and some procedures for how to work through that backlog, and we will take an item to the board at a subsequent date, so we can move through that in a expeditious but still fair manner.
Thank you. Moving on next to board member comments. Any comments from the board before we proceed to the agenda? Hearing none, now let's see. We have got correspondence and consent agendas, items 8 through 17 inclusive. Unless someone has a question or a comment, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. There's a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion's carried. Let's move ahead then to the regular agenda, item number 18.
Chair West, members of the board.
I don't think is that on, John?
Should be on now. There we are.
Yes.
Providing background on this issue, the original reserve fee was created back in 2006, but in October 2020, the board adopted a resolution 2020-05, which imposed the $20 per acre foot fee on groundwater extractions to provide revenue to the GEMS fund for legal fees. There was a stipulation in that original resolution that the fee would terminate in October 2024 unless the board acted to extend it, which they did in September of 2024. The board adopted the subsequent resolution number 2024-05, which extended the reserve fee until September 30th, 2028, but left in the provision that it should be reviewed annually in a public hearing, which is what we are doing today. So the discussion, the revenue and legal expense projections have showed that the fund will in fact carry a negative balance unless we continue to collect the reserve fee. And that is due to considerable, if you go to the next slide, please, sorry. That is due to the considerable expenditures on our ongoing 2 adjudications, plus the challenge to the OPV allocation ordinance. And given the current legal situation, we expect that our legal fees will remain substantial for the foreseeable future. Next slide, please, which is our estimate of legal fees, which shows prior years, which are actuals, and then projected for the next 2 years. And as you can see, the legal fees are in excess of $1.5 million for this year, and the estimates for the following 2 years. Next slide, please. Agency accounts, this is a very brief description of the agency accounts. The one in the heart of this matter today is a designated GEMS account, which is a surcharge specifically for those legal expenses. Next slide, please. So the staff put together a revenue and cash flow analysis for the account. I do want to call attention that the numbers in this do differ slightly from the numbers that are in your board letter. The numbers that are in this presentation and in the exhibit are updated and are more accurate. And what they in fact show is a deeper deficit than what we projected in the board letter. But what this cash flow analysis shows is, again, actuals and then projection. And the projections are if we do not collect a fee. And as can be seen, we very rapidly run a very large negative balance in that account without collecting the fee. So next slide, please. So our recommendation is to approve, extend a fee of $20 per acre foot, which has been the consistent fee for a number of years, to maintain the reserve fund and pay the costs and expenses of legal actions and proceedings.
Thank you, John. It certainly seems that the need is even more acute now than it was in 2020 when the ordinance was first adopted. But with that, any questions or comments from the board before we open it up to the public? Hearing none, any questions or comments from the public on this item? Hearing none, we'll return to the board for further discussion. Any motions?
Tremblay, I'll move staff recommendation, and it's specifically item 2 in the recommendations in the staff report, and bullet 2, I think, on the PowerPoint.
Which would be adopting resolution number 2025-07.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. It's a resolution. We need a roll call.
Director Long,
Yes.
Director Ballhorn,
Yes.
Director Pavia,
Yes.
Director Trimbley,
Yes.
Chair White.
Yes. All right, moving on, we're going to advance to item number 20 on the agenda.
Good afternoon, Chair West, members of the board. For the record, I'm Dr. Farai Kaseke here to present item number 20, which is an update. No, that's not the right slide. Yeah, it's not. That's not the, yeah.
Do you want the hard copy?
I could probably do it off the,
Keely, have you seen? I've got multiple ones.
yes. Thank you. So as a way of background, the
That's sum total.
item 20 is the approval of the Las Posas Valley Basin annual water right allocations for water year 2025, which is October 1st, 2025 to September 30, 2026. So As a background, the Las Posas Valley adjudication judgment adjudicates all groundwater rights within the LPV groundwater basin. And as part of this, it establishes the annual allocations that water right holders get. The annual allocations depend on the operating yield of the basin, and the judgment sets this at 40,000 acre-feet, at least until water year 2024. That's for the first 2 years.
We had the PowerPoint up.
It was the wrong presentation.
It was the wrong presentation. They don't have the right one up. Got me. I think Elk is looking for it, but
I think it's missing.
Okay. So the judgment sets the operating yield at 40,000 acre-feet until at least water year 2024, which was for the first 2 years. And the total allocation basis, according to Exhibit C of the judgment, that was 41,851 acre-feet, which is 1,851 acre-feet more than the initial operating yield that's stated in the judgment. And so we had to have a ramp down such that we can account for that excess. As a result, we're able to reduce that to 40,000 acre-feet. The annual allocations calculations are based on the protocols and formulas in Exhibit D to the judgment. That's how we calculated those. And on January 22nd of this year, your board approved an extension of the initial operating yield into water year 2025, bringing us to where we are right now. So before preparation of this annual allocations calculation, staff reached out to water right holders that have a conditional domestic allocation on July 29, asking them to confirm whether they had met the conditions set forth in the judgment for them to be able to accrue that domestic allocation. We had back from Hypericum Land Company and Hypericum Interests, LLC. Oh, great, now it's up on the board. And those are the exhibits that we have. And they confirmed that they have not met those conditions as yet, but reserve the right to request such allocation in the future. We did not hear back from Del Norte Water Company, and so staff went ahead and prepared these annual allocation calculations based on the assumption that the conditions had not been met. On August 28, a draft of the water year 2025 annual allocations was referred to the PAC for consultation per the requirements of the judgment. And staff then posted this onto the website and sent out an email to the water right holders, notifying them and asking them to check and make sure that those calculations were correct. The PAC endorsed these calculations in a recommendation letter dated September 4th. Oh, now I have it. And that is just an example of it. It's too small to look at, but with the link, we can get to the actual calculations. These are basically the same as last year's calculations, except for a few changes where you have changes in WMID ownership. So essentially, water year 24 and 23 is the same allocation that people will get for water year 2025. The operating yield of the basin isn't changed at 40,000 acre-feet, and therefore, the recommendation from staff is that you receive and file this report and that you adopt the attached water right allocations calculations for the Las Posas Valley Basin for water year 2025. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
thank you, Fry. Any questions or comments from the board?
Yes. Can you walk me through, so if I am a landowner and I now have this new allocation, when we do our billing, what is our billing from?
The billing is based on the allocation that you have received under the judgment. Thank you for bringing that up.
So it's the allocation moving ahead. So if this gets approved in September, this is for future water that is going to be billed, not past water?
Yes, this is for water year 2025, so October 1st to September 30,
Okay.
2026.
So, okay, I appreciate that, because when I think 2025, I'm thinking January. And then you're telling me that my allocation is less, but I already used. I'm just making sure we're not charging people or changing things after the fact. So we're preempting for the future water bills.
Yes, so the allocation is based on the water year. And so these calculations that we've calculated, these are valid from October 1st of this year until September of next year. And so that's basically, the allocations can change based on the basin optimization yield study, which hasn't been completed. And that's why your board adopted the 40,000 acre feet operating yield into water year 25.
Okay, and so when you see the bill, the water allocation for the next time will be different than what their current bill is?
It may be different, yes, based on the basin optimization yield study.
Okay, because I'm just assuming that people don't pay attention to us. And so they're going to get hit hard with some fees if they're not paying attention to what their current allocation is based on this. That's why just saying that out loud, I'm going to have to say that a lot of times because I don't think people are really paying attention. So, thank you.
And just to clarify a point, because there is occasionally some confusion on it. We operate on a water year, which runs from October 1st of one year to September 30th of the following year. And that water year is called the year in which it begins. So, for example, water year 25 is October 1st of 2025, although it runs all the way to September 30th of 2026. We still call it water year 2025. That's a point that occasionally gets lost, so I just wanted to clarify.
Just to clarify a little bit further, that's according to the judgment, which is a year behind. So under the GMA, the same period will be referred to as water year 26. So it's flipping between the two. No, it's a bit confusing.
Michael?
Okay, so just on that point, can we change that? Because I think that would be great.
If we take it to court and have them amend that, but I understand that because it's under appeal, we can't do anything about that.
From
the
an
moment.
agency perspective, could we change, or is this going to throw off the whole data system?
It's actually more of normal convention would throw everybody else off that's looking at our allocation system. So the one that is under the judgment is inconsistent with the naming convention. So we'd need our advice to change what's in the judgment.
And the naming convention is under DWR, is that who would normally set that? Or
I can't really tell because I've used it so often, so I can't really say where that came from.
Well, I definitely think this is something that we should take up.
Yes.
Because it's very confusing if we have two different kind of reference points for the same year.
I totally agree, but at the same time, with the OPV adjudication coming up, if the judgment then gives us a date which is based on the normal convention, and we have already changed this out here, I think the proper way would be to focus on what's in the LPV adjudication would be the one that needs to be changed.
Okay, well,
So,
For simplicity's sake going forward, my recommendation is ignore the naming convention in the judgment. It's immaterial. As long as you're complying with the substance of what the judgment requires, I don't think anybody's going to care much what you call it.
yeah, I agree, but I've definitely been a little confused thumbing through the Fox Canyon website and seeing, water year 26 versus water year 25. So as long as we can kind of get on the same page, I don't really care how it happens.
How it happens. The problem also happens when people look at items under the GMA
Versus the
normal-
water master.
versus the, and so we then have to kind of try and make it clear that if you're reporting under the GMA, this is the time period we're talking about. If it's under water master, this is what they're talking about. Otherwise, there's confusion of people trying to apply different years to the different reporting agencies.
and so that's why I keep bringing this stuff up. And so the question is, can you do a footnote on the websites or something to maybe explain it a little bit?
Yes.
I know we can't change it because we'd have to go back to court for the water master part, but we do know that the water year is usually based off of DWR and their information. So we have to stick with that, but I do think we need to make sure it's clear with everybody.
So on the website, we have clarified under the GMA portion of it what the water year is and the reporting periods, and you can see the reporting period as we refer it to under the GMA. Under the water master side, we've also done the same so that we're consistent with what's in the judgment.
You know, maybe just as an addition, on the allocation, it says water year 2025, and it shows that it's updated, you know, August 28th, 2025. Maybe it would also be helpful to put the actual dates that run on the allocation schedule.
Okay, we'll definitely do that.
And I just had one other point kind of along with Director Long, and it was that although this allocation schedule is setting the billing for 25, 26, there is also another part of the equation, which is the surcharges and the carryover that is going to be calculated at a different time, maybe in November, December this year, that will affect the 25, 26 amount that the users actually owe. And that's kind of creeping into the next presentation, so I don't want to spend too much time on that, but just wanted to highlight it.
So, just thinking out loud, this issue has come up before. It's a financial issue because it's dealing with the money that folks owe. My recommendation, Gene, is that the Finance Committee at some point in time put this on their to-do list and take a hard look at how to simplify this so we don't have to go through this exercise. And we have gone through this exercise a number of times over the years because new people come and go and people forget, and there's no clear way to figure this out. My suggestion would be if the Finance Committee comes up with the protocol, putting the full date on it, I don't care what the answer is, but it becomes a consistent point, and we could put into our webpage a clarification on these reporting dates that follows this agreement that the Finance Committee comes up with. I think we need to spend time doing it, and I think we could go round and around at this level and not get anywhere, and I would suggest we add it to the to-do list for the Finance Committee.
That'd be easy to do.
Yep.
All right, anything else from the board before we open it up to the public? Any questions or comments from the public on this item? All right, hearing none, we'll return to the board for further discussion or motions to adopt the proposed annual water right allocation for water year 25-26.
That's an easy way to say it. Yeah. Also move.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Which one is the first?
Yep. There's a motion and a second,
Okay, I'll be the second.
There you go.
okay?
Who made the motion?
And this isn't a resolution,
Item
all
here.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, hearing none, motion's carried. We will move on to agenda item 21.
Chairers, members of the board, for the record, I'm Dr. Farika Sake, presenting item number 21 in your agenda packet, and this is a resolution approving a $7.25 basin assessment for fiscal year 2025 to fund the implementation and work on projects included in the LPV basin optimization plan. So the judgment requires Watermaster, following committee consultation, that they should prepare an annual Watermaster budget, and it basically includes three components: an estimated annual cost of administrative management of the basin, investigations, compliance with, and enforcement of the judgment, which I just like calling administrative and technical part. And then the second component is the estimated annual costs of the construction, operation, maintenance, administration of groundwater enhancement or basin optimization projects, which I just call the replenishment. And then the third part is any adjustments to the basin assessment. This Watermaster budget is funded by the basin assessments per the judgment, and Watermaster, following committee consultation, shall assess a uniform basin assessment per acre-foot of annual allocation held by the water right holder. Now, the first two Watermaster budgets funded the administrative and technical work to implement the judgment and its new requirements and policies. However, the judgment also provides that water master may reduce the amount of basin assessments levied on water right holders that pay an assessment to United Water Conservation District, if water master determines that such a reduction is appropriate as a matter of equity. As such, some water right holders in the West Las Posas management area within United Water Conservation District service area have raised concerns about a basin assessment that may be duplicative of fees paid to United Water Conservation District. And those are the exhibits 21A and 21B. Taking that into account, staff then recommends that your board separately approve, invoice and collect basin assessments for water master's administrative or technical expenses separate from the water master project or replenishment expenses. This approach would basically isolate funds for the basin optimization projects from the administrative and technical expenses and facilitate implementation of specific assessments for or fees for different management areas that your board may authorize as a matter of equity. This has been brought before your board earlier on, and so we're currently under talks or mediation with Del Norte to see if we can find a resolution for this. But until that time, we still have to figure out how we implement the basin optimization projects that are in place, that your board adopted the basin optimization plan on June 25 of this year. And those basin optimization projects are basically projects that are most likely feasible, cost-effective, and to be implemented by the 2040 deadline, such that we maintain the sustainable yield at about 40,000 acre-feet. And in that basin optimization plan was a 5-year budget for basin optimization plan project improvements, operations, and maintenance. The first year of that budget estimates that the cost is going to be around 290 to kind of put the policies in place for these suite of projects that are identified in the basin optimization plan. On July 23rd, your board adopted the water master budget for the upcoming for the current fiscal year, and this basically was for the cost of the administrative and technical work. It did not include the basin optimization projects. August 28, staff referred the basin optimization basin optimization plan projects to the PAC with 3 asks specifically. One, should we assess a special basin assessment to implement these projects, these basin optimization projects? It's a mouthful. Should we keep that at $7.25 an acre-foot of groundwater allocation, as in the budget? And at what frequency should this be invoiced? And the PAC basically made a recommendation that affirmed all 3 of these questions that we had asked them. On September 24, which is today, we're before your board asking that we can go ahead and implement this special project basin assessment. So in summary, the initial basin optimization plan, your board approved that and adopted it in June 2025. It sets the basin optimization projects, but we don't have funding for that currently under the Water Master budget. Your board adopted the Water Master budget and Resolution 2505, which basically excludes the basin optimization projects. And the PAC has recommended the special basin assessment for the BOP projects. And that's just a breakdown of the cost. The total cost will be $7.25 an acre-foot, which is roughly $1.82 an acre-foot. This will then be invoiced as a separate line item on the basin assessment invoice, such that the total amount that water right holders can expect to pay per acre-foot of groundwater allocation is $67.25, which is about $16.82 cents per acre foot of groundwater allocation per quarter.
Can I ask one question on that?
Yeah.
So just for clarification, if you can go back to that slide. One thing is if you used if you're allocated a certain amount of water and you go over that allocation, you're still paying for these other fees with that over allocation, or are you capped at what you're supposed to get? So say I'm supposed to get 40 acre feet and I used 50. I'm still going to get charged the $7.25 for the 50 and the $16.82 for the 50, even though my allocation is 40.
I think that will then go into the overuse, because what you've basically done is gone over the overuse. This is based on your allocation. So this fee would be effective if you're looking at the allocation that you've been given. If you go beyond that, that is treated differently, and that is charged at the Cayuga's Tier 1 rate, which is about $1,895.
Okay, so they will get charged up to the 40
Up
acre
to the
fee
40 acre,
for those
yes.
two fees and nothing more.
That's correct.
Because anything more will be charged a whole other thing for overuse.
Yes.
Appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
I appreciate the logic in separating out project assessments and administrative assessments, but I would have liked to have seen this 60 days ago when we adopted the budget and have done a single allocation, even if it was in 2 steps, rather than to bring it back piecemeal. Because I really don't want to get in the habit of upping the allocation every couple of months because another need arises. So for future reference, again, maybe these numbers weren't available 60 days ago because it was in July that we adopted that budget. These numbers may not have been available then, but going forward next spring, when we start talking about the budget, I would like to see this included in our discussions. Okay. Anyone else? Any questions or comments from the public on this matter? Hearing none, we'll return to. Oops.
So to your point, Gene, it may be that it may not be functional possible to do the sequence of events, and maybe a way to get around this 60-day delay, which I think is an important issue, is that maybe we have to address the best guess or the final number, and somewhere along the line at that point, make a suggestion or a projection of what that number will be in 60 days. In other words, I'm not sure that I think if I were sitting on staff and I had all the answers to present at one time, I would give the board the answers at one time because that's logical. There's a reason why it was delayed. If they can fix that problem, then fine. If they cannot fix that problem, we've got to give them a mechanism and maybe not a mechanism, but a message to the constituents that this is a work in progress and it's going to take time once we approve the budget. And how do we get through that? And maybe that's another issue that the Finance Committee needs to look at, because I agree with your analysis that the 60-day delay is not good, but if there's a functional reason why, we need to figure out a way around that, and I don't know how to do that.
No, I agree, and I think this will happen from time to time with new projects coming up mid-year and things like that. For this purpose in particular, this is, I think, a short-term problem. As we had discussed in the Finance Committee, essentially building reserves to over a period of years to a particular target. When the reserves are fully funded, then an item like this could come out of reserves to be made up in the next year's budget. But we're not there yet. But I just don't like the optics, or the need to keep coming back and picking people's pockets, even if it's for a good reason.
Yeah, no, staff appreciates that, and this was more of a process item that we'd overlooked, and once because we needed to give the PAC time to weigh in as well on this issue, and that kind of delayed that. But hopefully, moving forward, we should be able to better align these to come before your board at the same time.
I also would just add that after the basin optimization yield study is performed, it's going to be a lot easier to kind of forecast what projects and finances are going to be coming down the line. So,
Yeah.
and then just one other question: this first basin assessment installment, will that be on the next basin assessment bill? Because we waived the
It
fourth
will-
quarter, right?
Yes, so the next basin assessment is actually going out October 1st. That'll be is scheduled to go on October 1st. And it will have this as a line item should your board adopt it.
Thank you.
All right, staff has recommended adoption of Resolution 2025-07. Is there a motion to that effect?
Tremblay second.
There's a motion and a second. We need a roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. All right, thank you, Farai. Moving on to item number 22.
Good afternoon, John Demers, Executive Officer again. This item is a bit of a continuation from the item we just had a few moments ago concerning the water year and the water year allocations. And this was prompted by actually a suggestion from Director Long, suggested that we clarify, since this is, it's relatively new, the judgment is, we are concluding the second year under the judgment, the second water year. To clarify that, second water year under the judgment. And as you can see, that will trigger a kind of a new process within the water master, which I will attempt to elucidate and describe for information only. I'm pointing at the wrong place, probably. There. So the background. The LPV adjudication, the judgment defines overuse as a use in excess of that allowed under the judgment. And that allocation, as we just spoke a few moments ago about, is determined for each water year by water master following committee consultation under the formula set forth within the judgment. And as noted again in the earlier discussion, those allocations are going to be maintained for now the third water year and awaiting the basin optimization yield study and further consultation before suggesting any changes to there. So an overuse occurs when a water rights holder uses groundwater in excess of the annual allocation, again, that we just approved. And the caveat of that is mutual water companies with exclusive shareholders have some special provisions in that, for example, if a mutual water company had one shareholder who was a little over and one that was a little under, they could just average it out internally without creating an overuse condition. I've oversimplified it, but the takeaway is that it's a little different for exclusive shareholders and mutual water companies. So the converse to that is a water rights holder who uses less than their annual allocation may carry over the balance to the following water year. The judgment requires that prior to the charge of an overuse assessment, a water rights holder may cure the overuse during the next water year. And that is why this is significant, because we've had the first water year, so anybody who had an overuse during that year was allowed the water year that we are concluding right now, the cure period, to address that. But we're coming to the conclusion of that second year and the cure period for overuse. So those that were unable to cure the overuse will be subject to the overuse assessment, a rate that was approved by an earlier resolution 2025-03. Try again. Okay.
Now, John, for a second, just as a point, the carryover is a new variation of the term a credit. And this agency has dealt with credits for a long time, and it created over time frankly, a nightmare. And so I'd like to talk about that, so I'm going to reserve at some point in time, we come back to that issue, or we can talk about it now. And my concern is I do not want to create a carryover, which is a word, but it is equal to the word credit, and I'm not looking to reinstitute, quote, credits, but the credit process that we had at this agency allowed certain entities to amass massive amounts of credits. Massive amounts of credits.
Well, in the carryover provisions in the judgment, it's not something we can change. And as I recall, there's a mechanism, they don't last forever.
That's okay, that's where I was going. So what is the answer to that question?
Well, the carryover amount is the first water used in the following water year. And I believe any carryover amount, and I'd have to check, but I believe it sunsets after 5 years. So you don't doesn't get to last perpetually.
And
And in fact,
I would also add that the max that any one water right holder can accrue is 150% of their allocation. So there are
sorry?
some limits and protections on that.
The maximum is,
150% of any individual's
and all carryovers sunset
after 5 years.
progressively at 5 years. Okay, you've answered my question and my concern, because we did not have that solution in the credit process we created a number of years ago, and that's where the nightmare was created.
And I think that users need to know that. So wherever we put that in our bills or wherever, you cannot accrue more than 150% of the credit. Needs to be clarified so that people don't think they use 200 and they're way over and they can keep rolling it to.
So I don't know if the judgment addresses a market for those credits, but that was another issue that was created out of the first iteration of this thing 25 years ago, before this litigation about credits. So I don't know if the judgment addresses that.
I don't think.
And I think
No,
the
the judge-
sunset, and
the
I think the
judgment does
sunset takes
not-
care of that.
The judgment does not create a water market, so to speak.
Yeah, and I'll get to that in a few more slides.
Okay.
We'll talk about that. But that's correct, is that it's not an unlimited accrual system. And
Okay. All right.
I omitted that in the brief.
That solves the bulk of my problem. Thank you.
Okay, so for, just to reiterate, the first water year under the judgment, water year 2023, and I've listed the dates there, perhaps thinking ahead for clarity, but that was the first year for reporting groundwater use under the judgment, and that's the first year where an overuse or a carryover could be determined. So following from that, water year 2024, which is coming to an end here shortly, is the first year where overuse may have been cured. So at the end of water year 2023, as it noted, approximately 56% of the WMIDs were in a carryover situation. Approximately 17% were in overuse, but the real takeaway is about 1 out of every 4 had not reported adequately, i.e. they were missing 1 or more reports. So we could not determine carry use or carryover or overuse. And staff is working to resolve that and get more detailed reporting, but it remains a challenge. So curing an overuse, this is the fundamental point. How may a water rights holder cure an overuse? So the judgment allows for several ways, but fundamentally, you must either reduce your amount of use during the cure period or obtain an additional allocation. All right, mutuals, as noted, slightly different. So if a water rights holder uses groundwater in the cure period at a lower rate than they did during the first year, such that their average across both years is under their annual allocation, they have effectively cured their overuse, and they do not owe an overuse assessment, and no overuse assessment will be applied. But if the rate of use was not reduced and the overuse condition remains, the water rights holder would need to obtain an allocation transfer from another water rights holder who has an excess allocation. And so they would obtain a transfer by the amount they were over, and thus curing their overuse and preventing the overuse assessment from being applied.
But that can't be the next year. It has to be within that 2-year period where that transfer is had?
The judgment states the next water year.
Okay.
The
So-
next year.
So if you think that, if you know that you're over the allocation after the 2 years, on year 3, you can get a transfer for that? So you're not overcharged?
Well, if you're
I thought
over
the
in
transfer
year-
had to be within the 2-year.
If you're over in year 1, you have to cure it in year 2.
Correct. If you're over in year 2, you must cure by the end of year 3, and on and on and on. It says the judgment states the next water year.
Okay.
So a transfer, a couple of notes on the transfer. One, we do not have an active water market at this point in time. So the agency does not, nor does the water master, have a mechanism that to facilitate that. What we do is we maintain and we publish on the water master website a service list with the contact information for all current water rights holders. So a water rights holder who needs an allocation transfer could use that service list. And again, as noted, they probably have business contacts, there are informal networks, they have personal connections, they can find someone within the basin who has an excess allocation who may be willing to transfer. As noted, approximately 56% of water rights holders after the first year were in a carryover situation, which meant they had, at that point in time, they had an excess. So the water rights holder in need of a transfer would then contact one of those individuals and would, in a private transaction, obtain a transfer. Now,
John, as I understand it, those transfers have to be approved by the water master?
yes, sir, and that is right here, getting to on the next slide. There
Have we developed the administrative process and the fees attendant to the transfer request?
We have, there is a transfer request form, as the first bullet shows. They must complete a transfer request form. We are revising it, and we will have the revised version up on the site shortly. Hopefully by October 1st is our goal, to have that available on the Water Master website. So both parties must complete that. Both parties must be in good standing, which means all their reports are in, fees are paid, et cetera. So they must be in good standing with Water Master. A domestic user may not transfer their allocation. They may receive a transfer, but they may not transfer their allocation. All the transfers must be within the basin. So both the transferring party and the receiving party must be within LPV. And then, to your point, sir, the transfer request must be approved by Water Master, and there are some caveats to that. We must find that there is no material injury or undesirable condition caused by the transfer. And that may become operative for different management areas within the basin. If there's a significant geographic separation between the parcels, they may be in different management areas, maybe some different rules apply, so we will take a hard look at those. If they're in adjacent parcels, that's unlikely, it's probably a non-issue, but if they're geographically separated, it may become an issue.
Because of that, and because of the staff time that'll necessarily be devoted to evaluating transfers for approval or not, there was some discussion some time ago now about instituting a transfer fee so that I guess, I don't recall whether it was to be paid by the transferor or transferee, but there was with the transfer request, there was a certain fee to accommodate the staff time involved in administering that, because otherwise, if it's lumped in with the general expenses, then everybody is paying to facilitate that transfer, and that didn't seem reasonable. Has anything further happened with respect to a fee for the transfer that you're aware of?
I would have to check on that, but at this point, I don't believe there's an intent to collect a fee.
Let's revisit that.
And that has to go with the PAC as well, right?
Sure,
They have to have
absolutely.
their discussion on it and to approve the form. I have concern on, that's why I asked for him to talk about this today.
And then in order to facilitate closing out the water year and our accounting, we have requested that, or we intend to request that all transfer applications are in by October 31st, so that we can appropriately close out the year and provide the overuse assessments and the invoicing so that we can collect and close out the year.
So then because of that, I have empathy for this process and for the stakeholders that are trying to do this transfer. But if I got my form in October 31st and this water master didn't approve it, I didn't have a chance to go find another one. I'm just saying that there might be that. I have no idea. Just troubleshooting here. And want to get an understanding of our board's empathy or feeling as to what happens, or just needing to understand this. Because I want people to be aware of this. I don't think they are looking at the spreadsheet saying, oh, what is my water allocation? And then they're going to go do this bill and go, oh, crap, I screwed up. And then they're like, well, when's the transfer for? And then this. So I just want to make sure we're very transparent of what the process is and how people can do it.
Yeah, because it could potentially apply. Again, we know that 17% of the people were in an overuse situation, but we don't know where 23% is. So we could potentially have as many as 40% of the people in an overuse situation.
Okay,
John,
council?
let's discuss that. I guess what is being done with respect to that 23%, and ultimately, if there isn't compliant, what are our options?
Well, and can I actually jump in even before that question? Because I think it's really important, for water year 23, 24, the carryover and surcharges, nothing to my knowledge is posted anywhere. So unless I'm mistaken, I don't think anybody knows actually what surcharges they had to cure for water year 24, 25. I see Fry coming up here. He's chomping at the bit.
So during the process of of calculating those, we send those to the PAC. I recall correctly, we also send them to the TAC.
So
we
for-
also had them on the website.
On 23, 24, you have
23, 24,
you have
yes.
that posted somewhere.
We had those posted right on the homepage of the Water Master. We then moved them to the annual report because they're part of the annual report. So they're contained within the annual report. That's where they are now. But we had them showing on the main page for, if I remember correctly, it was about a month or two. And then we had to move them to make way for all the other stuff that's coming onto the main page and put them up with the annual report after your board had approved the annual report. So it's not listed as part of that.
Just a off-the-cuff suggestion I think would be really helpful is maybe if we could maintain a link for the given water year that shows, all the users that are in a carryover position versus the surcharge from an accounting perspective. I think it's really helpful to have that segregated as opposed to just lumped into the next year's allocation schedule. And then also, you provide the service list without kind of knowing who has potential carryover to go after. You sort of have to be in this like Aaron Brockovich situation where you're just calling up people not really knowing that they may or may not have additional carryover.
Yes, I think you're right in saying that. But with the annual report, that's part of the reasons why the judgment says we need the annual report. It shall contain that list. And we put it in and sent an email out to all the water right holders, notifying them of that list and to confirm their allocations. Our consultant has sent, I can probably say, more than 5 emails each for each of those people that have not reported as yet. The funny thing is, for some of them, they pay their basin assessment invoice, but they ignore the extraction and use reporting. So if both were missing, then we'd say we have an issue with the emails that are there. So they are getting this information. They got this information on the extraction and use reporting. They got the information on the annual reporting and the calculations that were there. We had more than a month for them just looking at that, right smack in the middle of the water master page for them to be able to come to us, and we could actually go and fix any problems that were there. That did not happen. If they look at their emails that they received from water master, that email is there. And we've been sending more and more emails to them, reminding them, can you give us your extraction and use reporting, which I don't think we should really be doing, asking them to be providing us with information that the judgment clearly says they should be giving us. But we've done that multiple times. And this time, we're also sending out the extraction and use reporting for the second period, October 1st. Hopefully, we get better responses from that, but judging by the responses we've gotten from the first part of the reporting period, we still have an outstanding amount of people that have just not reacted to those emails. And I can say probably we've done probably about 7 outreaches just for the 25-1. So this is about people really just ignoring what we're asking them to do in time, and it really makes it really difficult for us to calculate. So even if we have it on the Water Master webpage, people are not responding to that because we are sending, these emails are then going out to the specific people that have not responded to that.
Yeah. I guess, so I manage a mutual, and I don't think I've ever seen a reporting that said, hey, you had X amount of, so I had, I don't know, 200 acre feet of carryover. I didn't, I'm on the board, and if I don't know about this, I'm imagining that there's a lot of people, in the public that really don't know about this.
We'll try and create an area where we can have it permanently on the first page so that people can have it. But at the same time,
Or on the allocation schedule, maybe a separate column that shows, the previous year plus or minus what's being added, I guess plus or minus doesn't work, but carryover surcharge, what's being carried over into the next water year.
we'll definitely look at how we can make that moving forward. Again, this is the first time that we're doing this, so it's a process. I'm not discounting that, but it's something that we can really look into and see how we can try and incorporate that. This is based off what we've been seeing over operations for the past year. Again, when we try and make, if I were to include the carryover from the last year in the current allocations that I just presented before your board, putting that on a PDF, those will be really, really tiny. And some people already complain about that, although you could, in theory, just magnify that on your PDF. But there are people that still prefer to see it on paper, and it becomes really tiny. And so it's just a question of trying to accommodate
So,
that.
and then just mechanically, so we just saw the draft allocation schedule. So what you're saying is the previous year, you provided the draft allocation schedule, you posted carryovers allocations on the website somewhere, and then at some point in the future, you kind of wrapped in the carryovers into the coming allocation schedule for the future year.
Yes, so for this year, what we presented is the draft annual allocations. We cannot do the carryover at this point in time because the
you don't have
second
extraction
we don't have
statements.
it. But once we have it, we will post that once we've done the annual allocations calculations. At that point in time, we will put it up on the website, send it to the PAC as the judgment requires, and make it available for people to make any corrections. That's an opportunity for water right holders to make corrections, send us the documentation to prove that.
And the value of the draft that we just saw today is you can compare the draft to the now updated in 3 months allocation schedule.
Yes, well, the allocation itself, this water year is for 25 allocations, right? What we're talking about is curing for the previous period, the first 2 years. And so that carryover overuse applies to these first 2 years. So if you have an overuse, that's for the second period. Either you cure for that or you pay the overuse assessment. This third year that we're looking at, it's basically getting you to start off with whatever allocation you have. If you have a carryover from the second year, first and second year, it will carry over into the third year. If you have an overuse, it will not carry over into the third year because you'll have to cure or you'll have to pay an assessment. So that's not going to carry over into the third year.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And also a question on the bill, like if I log in as a water mutual, will my bill show me those 2 years before and where I'm at? So it's the same that's on the spreadsheet, but on my actual data screen, if I log in?
So we're working on making that available to the different water users. So we have those allocations on the website right now. What they don't have is access to look at the account. And that's something that we're actively working on to make sure that people can simply log in. But those allocations are there on the website. They can simply look at those.
Okay, so if they log into their account, they won't be able to see this
Those are not yet
information?
available to them.
Okay,
We
so they
it
have to
in the
use the
test-
spreadsheet?
Yes, we're in the test mode of the database with that section of it. We just haven't made it go, because we're trying to figure out the transfer process and build that in so that people don't get confused with that.
So, this is a great discussion. It's a great discussion because we're early in the stage of being a water master now with 2 years behind us. And what we're finding out is it's much more complex than what we wrote on a piece of paper as part of this judgment. And I think that we need to have I'm going to use the term ad hoc committee. I'm going to say maybe the finance committee needs to sit down with a committee from with the PAC. And what we need to do is we need to get our hands and arms around this problem like ASAP. Otherwise, it's going to morph into a problem where people are going to have overdraft or over use, not paying their bill, not satisfying the requirements as specified in the judgment, and the water master is going to look like an idiot in the process when in fact we need to tackle this problem now and get buy-in from the PAC that they truly want to solve this problem and get their input on how are they going to assist us in solving the problem, because whether they do it themselves as their own water master or they use the GMA and its capacity as water master for them, this problem will have the same problems going forward.
I think we can task the executive committee with dealing with PAC on that.
What's that?
I think we could task the executive committee to deal with PAC.
Okay, so whatever committee, Gene, whatever committee you want, I think we need to make this an unbelievably high priority, because this has the potential to snowball on us where people aren't paying attention. We get overloaded with all kinds of excuses or whatever the case may be, and we're 5 years down the road and we got a nightmare on our hands. And I'm beginning to see that now. And I don't want to replicate the problems we had with the credit system that we put into the GMA way back when, because it just morphed into, frankly, a nightmare. And I think this is a high priority. And if it requires, in my opinion, if it requires additional staff to be able to handle this, I mean, if the numbers that have been suggested, that the percentage of people that are over, I don't know if it's true or not, but if they've suggested that those numbers are over with, and it's up to the water master to solve these problems, this is massive staff time that we may not have the capacity for. And to Gene's point, or whoever made the point, we need to figure out a way to offset that cost. And it's a bill that should go to the folks that have caused the problem. So there's a lot of balls in the air on this issue, and I think we need to make it a high priority. And I think at every board meeting, we need to have updates on what meetings you've had and where we are on the solution. And I'm open for all kinds of solutions, but it has to be solved.
I think you're right, Director Mulhart. It needs attention. I think the best way to deal with it, the judgment does provide avenues in which we can actually solve this issue. This is because it's let me call it, the early stages of implementing the judgment. Some of the things that you then pick up on are as you do it on the fly. Now, with the basin assessment invoices, there are some delinquent invoices that have been brought before your board, and we need to take legal action or the next steps that are there. I can see the same thing being done for the extraction and use reporting. Because we haven't assessed a basin assessment and use, an overuse assessment at this point in time, just trying to get everybody to comply with what the judgment requirements are at this point in time. Then once we're done with this accounting process and can show the people that haven't reported, then we'll definitely be bringing that to your board and say, hey, we have this list of people that ignored, that did not provide the information that we needed for us to be able to calculate overuse or carryover. How do you want us to proceed? These are
That begs the
provisions in
question I asked. What are our options with respect to that 24% who haven't reported for water year 2023?
Legal, do you have a?
The judgment provides us a number of enforcement tools, including to pursue any violation of the judgment. So a failure to report would be a violation of the judgment, and we could examine and pursue an enforcement action.
Typically, in the past, enforcement action has been very slow, almost non-occurring, and this type of enforcement action, since it necessarily involves asking the court for relief, will involve a separate layer of administration of time. For that reason, I would recommend we not delay. We've gone if we're a year out with non-reporting, I'd pull the trigger tomorrow. I wouldn't spend time. I wouldn't waste any more time warning people, telling them, oh, gee, if we don't get your report, we're going to have to go. Bullshit. We've done that. At this point, just pull that trigger. Let's not waste more time. It's either report or die.
I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate the sentiment. I would just also say that, Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency has one semi-annual extraction reporting system, and that all flows through FCGMA. The water master outsources this process, and it's essentially a survey that comes from, a consulting group. So it's very possible, and it's an email, request. And, the guy that runs the company, he sends a pre-email and says, hey, this reporting's going to come through. But this is not coming from the agency. And so I highly doubt that this 25% is intentional, because that isn't really supported by the amount of people that are missing these basin assessments. So they're paying the quarterly basin assessments, but they're not paying they're not reporting the semi-annual extraction statements. And I think that's because, it's not coming from Fox Canyon.
But on the other hand of that, before the consultant sends out, we send out an email from the water master email alerting them that you are going to get an email in the next couple of days or on this particular date from RGS for your extraction and use reporting. We have done that from the first time we send those out. So it's not like you're just getting some email that you're not sure of. We tell them where, the email address that's going to send that out, just to make sure that people don't miss that out.
Now, I know it's unpopular, but in my opinion, this agency has a tendency to coddle and spoon feed pumpers and constituents. These are businesses. These aren't kindergarten children. If they can't manage their own businesses responsibly, it's up to us to provide the information, but if they can't manage their businesses responsibly, that's not our responsibility. And I would not be as tolerant as some of the suggestions I've heard.
And on this consultant, is there any way for them to use our email, our water master at Fox Canyon, or anything to link the two together? Because I get tons of emails and I blow a lot off, because it's like, that must be a spam, that must be something. And I understand his point as well. So giving him one benefit of the doubt to say watermaster at foxcanyon.org or whatever it is. Have we gone that way?
But they have received, it's not just like a reminder, multiple emails from RGS.
I'm just saying in the future to kind of tie us together. That's all I'm thinking. I totally think that you guys have done a great job at emailing in the past. I'm just saying moving forward, so it's more clear that we're all one.
I mean, we'll need to talk to IT and see
Yeah.
if that's something
Thank you.
within the
I'd
county
appreciate that.
policies that will be able to do that. But again, we do send that pre-email before the consultant reaches out, just alerting people, on this day, you're getting this email. You are going to, it's for your extraction and use reporting. And then it also says in the subject email, the subject of the email, this is LPV Water Master. So at this point, the people that haven't reported, we've then targeted. We don't send it to everybody else. We just target those that haven't responded and send them multiple reminders to give us that information. And they just haven't responded to those.
Can I add another suggestion? Is we're utilizing the service list to send out these emails, correct?
That's correct.
So there could be a large percentage of people on the service list that are actually just the representation, the lawyers.
So
Maybe just something we could highlight, publicly on the website is that these landowners need to check the service list to ensure that their email is on it.
We've made that announcement so many times. We have it on the website. And the way that our system works, our database works, on the service list, you have the primary designee, and then you have a column for their attorneys. If you have a primary designee, that email that is being generated will go directly to that person as the primary designee. If we don't have any contact information, of which at this point we have most of the emails that we need, I think we're less one of the people that we're supposed to contact. If you don't have an email that is there, then we default to the lawyer on record.
But you can also have under the service list, I was dealing with a stakeholder the other day, I looked them up and just to confirm that it was correct, and there were 5 different email addresses in there. So you can have multiple email addresses, and the column to the right of that is the attorney email address. So there's a lot of communication flowing out.
So you can, like John is saying, you can basically put whatever number of designees that you want to receive communication related to your WMID. And so for those extraction and use reporting, it goes out to every single one of those people listed as your primary designee. So if all of them are receiving that and not doing anything about it, but they're responding to the extraction use reporting, this is just an issue that we have to bring before your board once we have all those stats. They will
Tony?
really.
Well, speaking as a lawyer for 42 years, if an attorney is the designee for a party, it is incumbent upon that lawyer to notify the party immediately. So I don't have a great deal of sympathy in that situation. The lawyer needs to take action immediately to do so. The second point is I'm with the chair on this. I think if we don't, we've set up what I think is a reasonable warning system or let me put it this way, notification system, and we still don't have compliance. If we don't do enforcement and we don't do it in a timely manner, we're just creating more problems for ourselves. So I agree fully with the chair. We set the rules get set, and then we have to enforce them. So generally speaking, I agree with the chair on this, and I think generally speaking, that should be our intention on a go-forward basis. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and my preference would, and not on an ad hoc basis. If there's a fuse, if it's, if you have 30, if a report is late 31 days after it's due, then by day 45, the enforcement action should be automatic. Not listening to excuses, not following up with phone calls, not spending a lot of uncompensated staff time. There's a process and a procedure and deadlines. And once people understand that those deadlines are real, you'll probably get compliance. But until they do, you'll have this problem.
Yes, sir. And I've already had this discussion with the staff. This is really our first opportunity, right? It's the end of the first cure period. It's the first time we're really looking at this. And I've had conversations with staff saying this is an opportunity to get it right from the start. And we are not going to miss that opportunity. We're going to get it right from the start.
Good, thank you. Any comments or questions from the public on this item?
Just for what it's worth.
Come on down.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Darrell Smith. I'm a grower. I must confess, I've sat back there and listened to this, and I'm confused. I can see I'm not the only one confused. So I can see that this situation is confusing. Having said that, my interest is clarification. There's a term used, water rights stakeholder. I need some clarification on that, because as I understand it, Judge Anderley, in his judgment, dismissed several people from being able to have allocations, which would indicate they're no longer water stakeholders. So how are you going to hold these people who are not water stakeholders? How are you going to hold them accountable? How are you going to, I mean, many of these people, I'm sure, are in compliance. They do their water meter adjustments. They do pay their fees, but yet they're not water stakeholders. So I guess what I need is some clarification in that Judge Anderley has dismissed several different people from being water stakeholders and not having any allocations whatsoever. It's somewhat confusing to me. Perhaps you guys can, in your infinite wisdom, help in some way or fashion to define to me what a water stakeholder is if the judge has determined that they're not.
Well, Darrell, within the context that you've raised, the short answer is we can't. That's what your appeal is about.
Granted. So
This
until the appeal,
this isn't the appropriate venue.
I understand. I just need some clarification. And perhaps it's out of order to ask for it at this time, in the fact that you say it's still under appeal. So I guess when the appeal is determined, then you'll determine who is a water stakeholder and who's not. And if they are, then they'll be have to be in compliance with all the rules and fines that you've set forth.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello, Chair, Board. Bert Perello, alternate M&I. I appreciate the discussion. I really appreciate the questions that have been asked. Thank you for asking the questions you've asked. Chair, I agree with you. There comes a time for action, but I want to share with you. When I first was appointed as an alternate, Charlotte Craven was a representative from the city of Camarillo, and I remember the first few meetings I came, and there were tremendous fees and fines that were to be discussed, and they were waived. For the most part, they were waived. And I firmly believe that unless you send a message that everybody understands, that type of thing will continue, and I agree with Mr. Mulhart on that. That type of thing can continue and snowball. There has to be a deadline, and rules have to count, and facts and evidence have to count. I appreciate the gentleman that just spoke and his concerns, but this is another opportunity to basically kick the can down the road and let somebody else deal with it. You're unfortunately in the spot where you got to deal with it, and you got to make the best deal for the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert. Anyone else? Anyone from the board? This is a receive and file only. There's no action noticed. Unless there's anything further.
Are you going to schedule an executive committee meeting between
Yes.
now and the next board meeting?
I'm not sure about between now and the next board meeting, but
Okay.
I think we have one scheduled. I'm not exactly sure when it is, and we'll get this on that agenda.
Okay, so my comment would be that I think the discussion we had today has highlighted a real problem that has the ability, as I've said, to snowball. And you've said you think that it needs to go through the executive committee. I'm totally fine with that. What I would ask is by the next meeting, you map out what those meetings will be and give us an update on what the strategy is. Staff's got a lot of assignment stuff to do. We need to make sure that the board stays on top of this issue and assist whatever committee may get a subset of dealing with this issue. You may, in your determination, say, well, there's some operational issues, send it on down the line. There may be a financial obligation, send it down the line. We need to stay on top of this because this could, as I said, be a nightmare for us going forward.
I would like to confirm that last year's annual report is on the Water Master website so that people have it. And then what we just approved for the draft Water 25-26 is on there. And also the updated transfer form and the comment of when that transfer form needs to be turned in by. I know we're going to go through, but just this is the initial process. So I just want to make sure that it's clear. And then also to make sure on our website that the consultant's email, wherever this blast is coming from, is stating this information is sent by this email or something. Just as, I know it's duplicative, totally probably is, but I just want to make sure that we state it very frankly in front so no one can say, I didn't see it. So that's just something I thought as we're going through this, because those transfers and so forth aren't on the bill when you log in. And so understanding that's going to be implemented soon, just trying to duplicate where we need to. So appreciate it.
All right. Yeah, so I can confirm that the annual report is on the website. If you look at the sub-menu, there is, I think, a reports button, and then you have all a reports button, and under that you have the annual report. In terms of the extraction and use reporting form, we're updating that, but that should be up on the website by October 1st. We're giving people until October 31st. One of the changes we wanted to make on that reporting form is we wanted to make it PDF fillable. At times, it's really difficult to read some of the handwritings that are there. So that's one of the major things that we just wanted to make sure we're able to address that. And I'm forgetting, I think you mentioned the third thing.
Just making sure the consultant email is there. All this information has been sent to you by this email.
We'll definitely put that under the extraction and use reporting. We have a section for that. I can't remember off the top of my head if we don't already have that in there, but I can surely speak for the emails that we sent, which we've already sent to people, just introducing that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Nothing further? Thank you. Let's turn back now to agenda item number 19, the hearing on RN Daily Ranch's appeal of the interim executive officer's denial of well drilling application number 0309. Okay, so we will convene the hearing with respect to that. Just for anyone interested, the order of the hearing will start with a staff report, followed by a presentation by the applicant or appellant, then presentations of other persons in favor of the appeal, followed by presentations from anyone opposed to the appeal. Appellant then will be given a chance for rebuttal. There'll be closing comments by agency staff and or agency counsel, and then board discussion and decision. With that, and I guess I will ask the clerk to swear in anyone who's going to testify in this matter.
Chair, if I could just add a couple procedural rules and policies that'll be applicable for purposes of this hearing. Just a couple comments. Unlike other proceedings or items in front of your board, this is a quasi-adjudicatory hearing. So unlike when your board adopts policies, plans that apply it on a general basin-wide or to every pump run basin, this is distinguishable. In this particular case, you're going to be determining the rights and privileges of one particular party, or at least two parties. An adverse party may result from your decision, and because your agency's decision will be final, that adversely affected party will have the opportunity to appeal to the Superior Court. So there is some formality to this particular hearing for purposes of that, or anticipation that there may be an appeal of your agency's decision. So there are some formalities. Notwithstanding those formalities, generally proceedings and hearings in front of your board are informal. There is a basic presentation requirement, or a basic presentation by either party. But for the attorneys in the room, the formal rules of evidence do not apply. The standard that's applied here is any information is admissible so long as it is the type of information that is generally understood by a reasonable purpose or reasonable person to be useful and admissible in this proceeding. Because this is an adjudicatory proceeding, exhibits will be introduced, and there is a process for that. So I would just ask for your patience as presenters and staff move exhibits into evidence. Staff's exhibits will be marked 1 and then sequentially, whereas all the parties' exhibits or witnesses' exhibits will be marked alphabetically. The chair mentioned the order of the presentation, so I won't revisit that. I would just note that your board can ask questions of staff, counsel, presenter at any time, not just during their particular presentation. And then finally, I would just draw your board's attention to the recommended action in this particular case, which is to direct agency counsel, or at the conclusion of your board's deliberation, direct agency counsel to prepare a decision consistent with your board's deliberation and decision, and then continue the hearing so that I can actually prepare the written decision and make it available for you at the next meeting for adoption. Any questions before I turn it over to staff?
Nope, thank you.
So good afternoon, Chair West, members of the board, members of the public. It's John Demers again, and I will be providing the staff report for this hearing. This is, as all parties are aware, a relatively complex issue. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of moving parts. I'll use that term, but I've done my best in this staff report to strip away anything extraneous and focus on the things that are most germane to the agency's decision and the agency's actions on this case. So I'll start with a general background. So all water well permit applications, all right, for areas within the Fox Canyon jurisdiction are reviewed for compliance. So following that, RN Daily Ranch LLC, which we'll refer to subsequently as Daily Ranch, filed an application number 309 by our records, for a well permit to install a well to replace the state well, which I would just call H03 for simplicity. H03 was drilled as a replacement for an earlier previous well, which for simplicity we'll refer to as H02. H03 and H02 are on different parcels with different owners. As noted, H02 is on a 50-acre parcel owned by, again, referred to for simplicity, the Nottingham Trust. H03 and the 225-acre parcel are owned by RN Daily Ranch LLC, and subsequently just Daily Ranch. So when H02, the original well in this case, failed, Daily Ranch submitted an application, which was number 272, just to keep track, for a new well, although noted that well was, the earlier well, H02, was not on the Daily Ranch parcel, but rather on the Nottingham Trust parcel. But Nottingham Trust acknowledged that the new well would serve both parcels and endorsed that application. So the approval of that well application, number 272, was granted by Fox Canyon for the new well, H03, and included several conditions, including condition number 2, that the new well would be operated under the same accounting code, which we refer to as a comp code, as the original well, H02. However, Daily Ranch failed to observe this condition and instead reported extractions for the new well, H03, under a new comp code until June 2020, when Daily Ranch acknowledged that they had changed comp codes and they had been reporting extractions in violation of condition number 2. The result of that error was that the new comp code for H03 had an allocation of 0. But when the error was corrected, H03 extractions were reported under the original comp code, the same comp code that H02 was in, and that comp code maintained the allocation of the original well, H02. Because under our regulations, wells within the same comp code can share an allocation.
John, quick question. Sorry, I'm not trying to jump ahead of this, but I see staff exhibit 02, well permit number 0272. And there's a bullet point that says the RANCAM COM code allocation was due to inclusion of 03H02 into the COM code. So I know there was a request from both parties that the COM codes be combined, and how I'm reading this bullet is that that the previous COM code was, or the well from the previous COM code was included into the RANCAM allocation. Can you just kind of talk about mechanically how the agency dealt with that?
Oh. I do. So I'm trying to follow the specifics of your question. So the condition, right, so you're talking the approval, for the earlier approval, it was a conditional approval. One of those conditions was that they would both be operated within the same comp code. There were some clerical errors on both parties, on the agency's part as well as the applicant's part, that caused some confusion there. The initial reporting for the new well was under a different comp code, but that was corrected, and all parties acknowledged that it would be reported under the original comp code because there was only an allocation within that original comp code with the original well, H02. So that's why the replacement well, H03, had to be combined within H02 within that original comp code.
Okay, so this line reads RANCAM, which is the new COM code, allocation was due to inclusion of H02 into the COM code. Into the COM code would be the previous COM code, the original COM code.
Yes, but as I said, there were some administrative glitches during that process, which took a while to iron out. As I noted, it wasn't until it was about 9 months later that everything got sorted and corrected and applied to the correct COM codes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Farai?
Yeah.
Do you solemnly state that the evidence that you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Yeah. I think just to get back to your question, Director Cravioto.
Can you up your volume? Thanks.
So my understanding of what happened is that after that clerical error that had been noted, that had been made by the applicant, staff worked with them to make sure that we could then bring in that H02 into the same code that had H03 that was accommodating that. And what that basically does is it brings over H02 with the allocation into the same COM code with H03. Because you have those two in the same COM code, that means you can then extract from H03 because you're using that.
Because the wells are summed in the COM
Yes,
code.
because you're summing the
Yes.
wells, but the allocations are different. H02 has that allocation, and H03 is just the point of extraction.
But H02 is now in the new COM code.
That was after they admitted that they had been inconsistent with the conditions in the permit. And that was, they could do it the other way around, whereby they bring the new well into the old COM code, or bring the old well from the old COM code into the new COM code. And so that was that compromise after both parties had agreed to bring them under the same COM code.
Right.
Which is the new COM code, the
Which is the
RANCAM.
new
Right,
COM code.
but they
Okay.
both had to be within one comp code. You're right, and there were administrative errors on both parts. Took some time, a little back and forth, and they worked it out, and that was the solution to preserve the allocation of H02, because otherwise there wouldn't be an allocation for that comp code.
Yeah.
So in the discussion, OPV allocation ordinance set new extraction standards, and it was based upon historical extractions for the allocation-based period as noted. And that allocation ordinance also includes provisions to allow for the transfer of extraction allocations. But notably, both the new allocation ordinance and even the older agency ordinance code require that requested transfer be submitted jointly by the parties involved. Also noted here in the discussion is that the agency has what we call Emergency Ordinance E, which limits constructions of new wells to replacement, backup, or standby. And for the purposes of this article, as defined within Emergency Ordinance E, a new or increased use is one that did not exist or occur before the effective date of the emergency ordinance. And as noted, H03 was drilled after that ordinance was adopted. So H03 did not exist during the allocation-based period. So extractions from H03 would have been a both new and increased use of groundwater under Article 4 of Emergency Ordinance E, if not for including it in the combined comp code. So here I've attempted to capture, again, this was, I am the executive officer now. This decision was not made by me. It was made by the interim executive officer. But in consultation with him and reviewing his notes, I have captured as accurately as I can the thought process for why that well application was denied by the agency. So the earlier application 272, right, for drilling H03, never transferred the extraction allocation from the original well H02, because as we've discussed, they were to operate under the same comp code as a condition of that permit and would deliver water to both parties. And subsequent correspondence has confirmed that Daly Ranch acknowledged that the allocation was with H02 and therefore necessitated using only the one comp code. OPV allocation ordinance states that, again, requests for transfer or temporary assignment of extraction allocation shall be submitted jointly by the operators and owners involved. So the application we received in question here, which would result in a new well to replace the now failed H03, was submitted only by one party, by Daly Ranch. And to the best of our knowledge, Nottingham Trust did not agree or consent to Daly Ranch submitting an application to transfer the allocation currently assigned to H02. Staff determined that all parties involved were aware of the requirement for a jointly submitted application, yet no jointly signed or submitted. The agency determined that the approval of application number 309 would have resulted in the transfer of an allocation for which the owner of that allocation did not consent to. And thus, the application number 309 was denied because it failed to satisfy the agency transfer requirements. The appeal. Daly Ranch appealed to the denial of application for well permit number 309 and requested this appeal be heard by your board. And the appeal was previously heard on June 13th of this year. However, that hearing resulted in a split decision because one board member was absent during that board meeting, and the tie automatically denied the appeal and continued the hearing. And the parties involved agreed to meet at a latter hearing, which brings us to today. So staff's recommendation, the agency is unaware of any change to circumstances which would change the analysis or decision in the previous review, which resulted in a denial. The counsel for Nottingham Trust represented that their client was waiting for a well sharing agreement before approving the transfer application. And the agency is not aware of any well sharing agreement, and we certainly have not received any copy of any executed well sharing agreement. We are also not aware of any agreement by Nottingham Trust authorizing the filing of the application or approving the transfer of allocation to a new replacement well. And that last point is the critical point to our decision process. And so based on the foregoing, staff recommends that the board affirm the earlier denial. And subject to questions, that concludes my presentation.
Before we take questions, John, I'd ask that you move staff exhibits into evidence.
So we have a rather extensive number of exhibits labeled as item 19 supplemental exhibits, and I move that they be accepted into the record.
All 12 of them?
All of them, yes, sir.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, they're admitted. Thank you.
John, if you want to add a well to a COM code, what's the current process for that?
You would have to have agreement of the owner of the comp code, and there would have to be allocation available for transfer from one of the wells existing within the comp code.
But kind of like what we spoke about and what actually happened is H2 fails, H3 is this new well to replace H2. H2 and H3 are in the same COM code, so there's no allocation transfer because the wells are collectively summed within the COM code.
Correct. Correct. But that, again, a comp code is a voluntary agreement among, because comp code could be multiple wells of one owner or wells of different owners who have agreed to operate in that manner and agreed to combine, and again, it's a combined code, comp code, have agreed to combine multiple wells within one accounting mechanism. Again, it could be multiple wells by one owner or individual wells by individual owners. In that case, though, it's a voluntary agreement, which could be dissolved within the terms of that private agreement for different owners of different wells.
And then to add, so just to add a well to the COM code, you need to get all the owners that are being serviced by that well together, and they need to sign a joint agreement? Is that what you're saying? Like there's actually a form that would get all the signatures of people being serviced by the well?
Well, that's a slightly different, and again, the comp code is an accounting practice. There are other ways to get people serviced by one well, water from that well, without entering into a comp code. You could do it either way. There's a variety of options available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, why couldn't you add a well to the COM code without transferring the allocation? You know, maybe this is the type of thing where we don't directly address the allocation transfer, but
Well, it
effectively.
wouldn't transfer the allocation. It would remain with the well. It would just be inclusive within the comp code.
Like it currently is. Or it currently was under the RANCAM COM code, which had a defunct well with the allocation and a working well with no allocation.
Correct.
And as I understand it, the application is to replace the well with no allocation. Is that correct?
The way the application was written, it was as a replacement for failed well H03.
So that was the well that had no allocation?
It had no allocation.
Understood.
But it had been operating for 6 years under the COM code using the allocation from H02, which had failed previously.
Correct. But again, that's a voluntary agreement that doesn't automatically go with, for example, H03 doesn't need to remain in that comp code. It could have moved to any other comp code, or that comp code could have included any number of other different wells, depending upon the agreement reached by the owners and or operators of those various wells.
Yeah. But the question is, can we add another well to the COM code?
You can add wells to comp codes with the agreement of
All members?
of the parties involved.
Okay.
And just to clarify, you have to sign an authorization form for you to be able to move that well into that COM code.
Right, to demonstrate that all parties involved consent.
Yeah, okay, that was my basic question, is, that's the process.
And so we don't have a form that was done for that?
Oh, the authorization form is there.
Yeah.
It's basically enabling you to put that well into the same home code.
Right.
Right? But it doesn't transfer the allocation. It simply allows you to operate those wells as one account. So
Yes.
you're extracting from HO3, but the allocation is with HO2. Until the transfer has been effected, until you jointly submit a well transfer, that allocation remains with HO2 until that happens. And that well sharing agreement did not happen, and therefore that transfer from HO2 to HO3 did not happen. So when HO3 failed, HO3 still does not have that allocation. The only reason why they were able to extract from HO3 was it was in the same home code with HO2, which had that allocation. So if you move HO2 away from that home code, essentially RANCAM will not have an allocation because HO3 does not have that allocation.
Which was the case for reviewing the permit application number 309. The owner of the allocation, which was the Nottingham Trust, owner of H02, even though that well had failed, they still own the allocation, and they did not consent to that replacement well being drilled. Because they did not want to give up their allocation without a well sharing agreement, is our understanding. But regardless, it needs to be jointly submitted, and it was not.
Anything further at this time? No, thank you, John. Then we'll hear from the appellant on this.
Good afternoon. Gary Arnold, appearing for Daily Ranch.
Mr. Arnold, do you solemnly state that the evidence that you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you. First of all, I want to make one thing clear with respect to the evidence. We had submitted all of our evidence at the prior hearing for June 13. Copies have already been disseminated. I don't have any more evidence to present today, so I'd like that to be admitted.
Sounds so moved. And those exhibits will be marked, exhibits A through, I can't remember the number, but we will mark them accordingly. And you have no additional, A through R, thank you.
All right.
And you have no additional?
No,
Thank you, Gary.
thank you. All of our information is really in the letters, the 3 letters or 4 letters that I've submitted, so I just want to summarize some things. I find the whole discussion odd and unusual that a allocation can be granted to a well that is failed and is inoperable and has been inoperable now for some 7, 8, 9 years. The Daily Ranch has, in fact, complied with all of the terms and conditions of the conditional approval when it drilled HO3. The only condition was that both wells, one of which had failed, be reported under the same COM code. That has occurred. So going back to 2018, and let me just remind the board that Noelle Nottingham Daly did sign multiple documents in which she approved the drilling of the replacement well. I'm having a hard time with my English here, I think. A replacement well is a replacement well. When you get rid of one well and add a new well, that's a replacement well. HO3 has failed. Now we're asking for a replacement, not of well HO2, but well HO3. And we're just asking that the continued allocations that had been afforded to both parcels of land continue going forward for the entire 275 acres. So nothing's changed. The land, the water will be made available on an equitable shared basis, as I put forth in my information to the board. It is unfortunate that for reasons that I cannot understand and cannot explain, that Noelle has failed, refused, without reason, justification, facts, information, no responses to me or my client about why she refuses to cooperate with this application. I don't know. We have tried numerous times to seek that cooperation, to seek that agreement, and she and her counsel simply refuse. They don't respond to us. So we're sitting here with an unusable, according to staff, an unusable allocation, which is now fallowing prime farmland that should be entitled to be farmed with irrigation water extracted from this replacement well, HO4. And that is essentially the request that we're making to you as the board, who, unlike staff, has the power and the authority to exercise your discretion and authority to override staff's rather rigid interpretation of your rules and regulations, saying, well, because Noel did not sign this one piece of paper, then we are going to mandate that 175 acres of prime farmland not be farmed in perpetuity until some other litigation between the parties is resolved. I think that's an abdication of your management duties as the board, and I would suggest and recommend that you override staff's denial and grant our appeal.
Gary, in the process that led up to the drilling of HO3, was there ever any discussion or negotiations with respect to an allocation transfer so that HO3 could receive the allocation that belonged to HO2?
I'm not aware of any discussions. It's in the evidence. There is a couple of emails saying, well, we don't have a well sharing agreement. We're working on one, and we would rather not, in quotes, give up our allocation until that water well sharing agreement is in place. After the last hearing, we have submitted and asked Noel we've drafted a water well sharing agreement. We've given it to him. No response. Zero. We've asked for, well, let's do a partial transfer. So we've got 275 acres at issue here. Noel is the owner/manager through her trust of 50 acres. My client is the owner/manager of the 225 acres. The ratio is very easy to figure out. It's 81.82% versus 80, the ratio is the same. The ranches have been farmed together. The water's been used across the 275 in an equitable way. Under the water adjudication lawsuit that we're all very familiar with, that's going to be the allocation, the split of the allocation between the property when that case is finally resolved. I don't see any reason to not allow my client to farm its property to the fullest extent allowed by the water extraction allocation. And we will, and we've offered to provide Noel's share of the water to her property for the benefit of the 50 acres. What do you do when you have a neighbor that simply refuses to cooperate and refuses to tell you why they refuse to cooperate? What are we to do? I think that this board has the discretion and the ability to resolve on an equitable basis the allocation issue simply by adding well HO4 to the same COM code that has been in place, which Noel agreed to combine the two old COM codes together as one, so that both properties will share the water in the exact same way that they have been doing for a couple of decades. Okay. I want to point out a couple other things. There's been, I just don't understand that this Article 4 of Ordinance, Emergency Ordinance E, it says that it prohibits the construction of new wells except for construction of replacement wells. And somehow staff then says that but if it did not exist before the initiation of the ordinance, then it's a new or increased use of water. If it's a replacement for a failed well, it's a replacement well. I read Article 4 as specifically granting the approval or the allowance of the drilling of a replacement well, not a prohibition of the replacement well. I'd like to also point out that the GMA granted, when well HO3 was drilled, a historical allocation of 517.58 acre-feet of water extractions. Later, when your new allocation ordinance was issued, a new allocation was issued. As part of the evidence, you should take a look at the grant under the new allocation ordinance of the allocation. The letter of June 8, 2020 was addressed to RN Daily Ranch LLC, Adele Poliquin, my client. It was given to Daily Ranch, not Noel Nottingham Trust. It is true that the 10-year historical extractions was based on the water extractions from HO2, but that well had already failed. Even if you're going to adopt a wellhead allocation right, how do you afford an allocation to an already failed well when the replacement well was already in place and operating? In my view, the allocation, in fact, was granted to HO3, not HO2, with the requirement again that both properties report their extractions on a single COM code. That's been done. And this process went on from 2018 to 2024 without objection. All of these semi-annual extraction statement reports went to Daily Ranch, not Noel Nottingham Daily. It put right on the statements are allowed allocations. So the notion that this was, somehow that my client never had an allocation for the 225 acres, I think is just, we're piecemealing bits of evidence together that just don't make any sense given the context of the entire long-term relationship.
Are the parcels, I guess, owned by the Noel entity being farmed now, or how are they being used?
My client, I don't know the answer. So both parcels were being farmed by Duda Fresh Farm Foods, okay? When the well failed last year, Duda made the decision that it could no longer, it didn't have enough water to farm 275 acres. They could only farm 100 acres given the amount of water available from a Pleasant Valley County Water District meter, okay? They reached out to my client and said, we can only farm 100 acres given the water, and we Duda want to farm that 100 acres on the 225 acres. What Noel and her representatives done on the 50 acres, there's bad blood. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. There's disputes going on. So we don't get any, frankly, we don't get any information. So we don't know for sure. The assumption is it's not being farmed, how it's being taken care of or in what fashion. I just don't know. Okay?
So if I'm correct, there was a person that passed away? on this with the Davy
Yes, it was
Ranch?
Noel's husband that
So
passed away.
Noel's husband, and so they're in court to,
Yeah, and
So-
look, and I'm the water attorney here,
gotcha.
not the probate attorney. I know nothing about the probate litigation in all honesty, so I don't know what exactly is going on there. I do know, I've been told that Mr. Daley, Richard Daley, had appointed his daughter, Adele Poliquin, as the successor trustee of one trust, and his widow, Noel, was the trustee of a different trust. And what caused this rift, again, I'm not privy to the information. I'm not sure that I would tell you if I did.
Yeah,
But
no.
the answer is I don't know.
I think, I appreciate that. I'm just stating that there may be a reason why you weren't hearing from him or something. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So,
Could I make a comment, Mr. Arnold? So just to clarify one of your earlier points about the address on the extraction statements and on the correspondence, it is agency practice to work with operators of wells. So an operator of a well is not necessarily the owner of the well or the owner of the allocation. So it's not just positive one way or another, having a name on that. It could be an operator, it could be an owner, it could be a manager. It's whoever the owner designated at that time to correspond with us.
yeah, but all the statements list both wells, HO2 and HO3, and give the allowable allocation on them. They're sent, I agree, they're typically sent to the operator to fill out. And those have been filled out and submitted on a regular basis, showing the total extractions that have been used for the irrigation of both parcels on a consistent basis. And again, for 6-7 years until the well failed. I wouldn't be here if the well hadn't failed. Of course.
Yeah,
So-
thanks, Mr. Arnold. I've got a couple
Yeah.
questions for you. So
Sure.
you're asking the board for allocations to go forward for both parcels, and you say that you're representing to this board that the water will be made available equitably, but on the other hand, you're conceding that no water sharing agreement has been reached. Is that correct?
There is no, to the best of my knowledge, there is no signed agreement between the parties.
Well, you're the water rights lawyer for your party. Is there a
to
water
my- to
sharing,
my-
is there a what, excuse me, is there a water sharing agreement that's been reached or not?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
So I'm to take it there has been no water sharing agreement reached.
Tony, yes, I believe that to be the case.
Okay, and then you said, you alleged that the staff had a quote-unquote rigid application of the ordinance, and Section 9.2 of the ordinance says, and I'll quote, it's from the PowerPoint, "Requests for transfer or temporary assignment of extraction allocations shall be submitted jointly by the operators and owners involved," close quote. If that's the case, can you illuminate why you think that is a rigid application of the ordinance when the ordinance on its face has that language?
Given 7 years of consistent utilization of a replacement well, HO3, that is and has been located on the 225 acres, there has been a recognition of all sides that the water, the allocations, are for the benefit of both parcels. As a practical matter, the staff has taken no action to shut down the extractions from HO3, to assert that penalties or surcharges should be asserted against the water extractions. So everybody on all sides for 6-7 years has accepted and allowed the allocations to be used for the 275 acres. We're asking for no other change or difference. We can't get the signature of Noel on the transfer application form.
Yet there's no, so there's no joint application.
There is no joint
You
application, I
indicated-
agree.
You indicate that there's disputes going on and bad blood between the parties, and I realize you're not the estate lawyer, you're not the probate lawyer.
You
But
know I
certainly in
could
terms of
not-
representing your client, certainly in terms of representing your client, from a water rights standpoint, you have a general understanding of what's going, I don't know, and I'm not asking why there's this dispute or why there's this bad blood. That's totally irrelevant to me. But do you know if there are currently judicial proceedings pending between the parties relative to this dispute?
I believe there are no proceedings whatsoever between the parties dealing with their water rights, other than the water adjudication lawsuit in which both parties are parties and represented by different legal counsel. But I am aware of no disputes, battles, controversies as to how much of the allocation belongs to the 50 acres compared to the 225 acres.
Well, let me reframe it this way. Is there currently litigation pending between the two parties in any form relative to trust matters or estate administration or any other way? Put aside water rights.
I understand that there is trust litigation going on between the parties, yes.
Okay, great. Do you have any idea what the status of that trust litigation is?
No, I don't. I do not.
Okay.
About the only thing I know, there's been some disputes of some probate accountings that have been prepared and submitted. I've not been made privy to any of the pleadings, the dispute resolution, so I really don't know. And too much more, Tony, would probably violate attorney-client privileges and whatnot. But the answer is,
Sure, why that would violate attorney-client privilege. I mean, you're acting as a water rights lawyer for your client in front of this board, and obviously, in my view, particularly given our evidentiary standards, that's relevant to me to understand why there hasn't been. I mean, one could ask the question, if you've offered to share water equitably, then why isn't there a water sharing agreement?
because Noel and her attorneys refused to respond to us.
If there's pending litigation, that tells me why. So I'm really curious as to what the status of that litigation is and whether or not it's foreseeable that that litigation is going to be concluded soon.
I do not know the answer to that. To the best of my knowledge, the trust litigation has nothing to do with water rights.
It may have everything to do with water rights, but okay, thank you.
If I may, though, a water rights allocation has value. In rural Ventura County, a groundwater right allocation is something of value. So that, total speculation, but that may be a factor in the trust or in the probate.
No question. And I guess my question to you all is it fair, is it equitable that an owner of 50 acres that has farmed their property jointly with 275 acres, is it fair and equitable for that neighbor to assert, apparently, that they have water rights associated with the 275 acres and refuse to give any of that water to the 225 acres? Is that fair? Is that equitable? And I agree with you. Does water have value? Does allocations have values? Do water rights have value? Absolutely. But we are being held up. The 225 acres is being held up by an abject, utter refusal to cooperate in any fashion.
And can I ask that you stated for many years there hasn't had to be a transfer form signed. It was an agreement.
I'm sorry.
Was for the last 6-7 years there wasn't a transfer form. You didn't have to have a signature to be sharing this water.
As I'm not sure what exactly forms existed by the FCGMA in 2018 when HO3 was drilled. I agree that a transfer allocation form, if one existed at that time, was not signed.
Right.
We do know that Noel, however, consented in writing to the replacement of well HO2 with HO3 located on the 225 acres. We're asking for now a replacement of that well, HO3, by HO4. We're not asking for HO4 to replace HO2. Staff concludes that's what we're doing. That's not our view.
Gary, during the years that HO3 operated as part of the COMCO, do you have any data with respect to how much of that water was delivered to the 50 acres and how much of that allocation to the 225?
It is my understanding that the farm was farmed, the land was farmed on a unified, aggregated basis, and that there was an equal sharing. I've asked the question, well, were there strawberries planted on the 50 acres? And were there orchards on the 225? You know, in terms of a differentiate? And the answer is no. Both for all 275 acres were being farmed in the same way, using the same amount of water, and it's all commingled. That's why I say I'm utterly convinced that whatever the ultimate conclusion is, whatever is determined to be the water rights for the 275 acres is going to be split between the parties, 50 275ths versus 225 275ths. That's what it's going to be. And honestly, that's what I'm asking you to confirm today, notwithstanding, Tony, the omission of Noel, our failure to be able to get Noel to sign the transfer form.
Well, but in effect, what you're saying is, trust us. We will do an equitable split in the absence of any water sharing agreement, right? I mean, isn't in essence, that's what you're asking the board to do?
Only allocate the 81+% to the 225 acres. Leave the allocation for the 50 acres with what they have.
And ignore the plain language in the ordinance.
I think it's been ignored for 6 years by staff and by both parties. So I don't think you're you know, if we want to talk like lawyers, it's a kind of a waiver and estoppel issue. So you've been operating under this regimen for 7 years with no objections, no controversy, and then, you know, I mean, don't the parties, aren't they made their bed, they're sleeping in it. Let them continue to sleep in the bed that they've made.
Well, I would love to respond as a lawyer, but I don't think the waiver and estoppel issue has any merit on this case. So, thanks.
So, first of all, for the record, I'm not an attorney. Everybody knows that.
Oh, Lynn, now come on.
I am not an attorney. I wouldn't ask any of you to tell me how to fly to London from New York, so I'm not in your business. So my question is not so much a question, but a comment to try to. If I recall, at the last go-around on this issue, the issue that really drove home to me is not your argument of quote-unquote fairness, but that the GMA was not the agency to solve a trust estate probate issue, and we are looping the GMA, or trying to loop the GMA into a position that could have unintended consequences in different disputes down the road. And I think we've done a pretty good job as an agency, an excellent job as an agency, of trying to stay out of this level of the disputes, because it's really not what we do. And so my comment is that I think the record that you've outlined for 6 years, the record of the well failing and other wells replacing, and the movement of water on these two parcels, and as I read through, and I'm not trying to put words in the mouth of the other party, but if I read it correctly, it says, then I don't know if the attorney's here or not, but it says, I represent the Noel Nordington Daly, trustee of the Daly Marital Trust, blah, 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 blah. submits this response opposing the appeal. So what you have is, in my opinion, you have a family trust that's going through a probate process and is trying to figure out how to balance the water allocation that is now shared on 2 wells. And I think the argument that you make on just the history of it has validity, but I'm not convinced that we at this agency have the right or the authority to do this when, in my opinion, again, not an attorney, this is a family dispute and a trust issue. And if I was in this position, I'd say we need to file a statement with the probate court that this is not fair. And I don't know if that works or not, and I don't need you to give me a bunch of legalese. I'm just throwing this out, that I am concerned that this agency is going to get backed into unintended consequences. And it's questionable if we even have the authority to do that. I think that's why we had a split vote. And I think that going forward, my sense is that your arguments, as passionate as you are about your arguments, this is not the forum to do that. There's another forum, and I think you could, I think you could be more successful in that forum. And with that, I'll shut up.
Well, I've just observed that the FCGMA is the manager and management of the basin and the water resources in that basin. I think this is exactly the right forum for reaching an equitable, fair way to manage those water resources. Right now, given the current state of the events, we've got 175 acres of prime farmland that is fallow. It's not being farmed. There is no water being used, so I guess as a water manager, if your goal is to preserve the basin and deny all farmers the right to farm, so be it. But I don't think that's the mission of the agency. I think the mission of the agency is to equitably, fairly manage the water resources to the benefit of the community. And I think that by not affirming the appeal, that the agency is really not fulfilling its duties and obligations. And I think we've introduced adequate information and facts to say that the allocation that was based upon the 10-year base year period should be shared on an acre-to-acre basis across the 275 acres. I mean, to me, that just is perfectly reasonable, and I think that you, the directors, have the authority to make that finding and allow at least the 225/275% of the overall allocations to go to well HO4 and approve the application to drill that well, so that we can get this land back farming for the benefit of the entire Daly family, and that's the goal here. Because remember, the trust that Noel is the trustee of, there are beneficiaries of that trust, which include the children of Noel. And, once you lose rents forever. And the longer this goes on, the more and more damage is being done to the family. I think you've got the authority to make things right. That's my request.
I got a question for staff or council. I'm just wondering, is there, I guess, precedence for another ComCode case where there was kind of a dissolution of wells where the agency stepped in and played this kind of arbitrator role, dividing up allocations between ComCodes?
I'm personally not aware of another similar situation.
and let me follow up on that question. Comcodes aside, is there a process in the ordinance code that allows the agency to transfer an allocation between parcels, which parcels were serviced by just a single well?
Short answer is no. I can read you the entire transfer provision.
No, that's okay. No, I'll take your word for it.
Because I mean, from an operational perspective, surely there are situations where, well owners, just for efficiencies, they may use more of one well than another. And surely there's been a situation where this COM code has been dissolved, and I'm wondering how those allocations were kind of handled if there was a dispute.
Well, if the allocations didn't transfer, they'd remain with the original owner of the allocation.
Correct, and I would just add that with respect to COM codes, or to the extent that COM codes are at issue in this appeal, the agency has very few rules and regulations on the administration of COM codes. It's very much left up to those well owners and operators that want to participate in any one given COM code. There is an authorization form, as staff indicated. However, as long as we get that authorization form, it's more or less at the discretion of the parties. how they
Before we
want it.
get too far down the road, there are other people who want to testify, so I didn't want to
Well,
foreclose that.
can I just ask
Of course,
one
oh,
more
yes.
question? And that's regards to your Exhibit C. It talks about, number 9, it says, "The partnership's profit and loss shall be allocated amongst the partners in the same proportion as their ownerships of properties." So they're saying that the water, all that stuff is divvied up as the partnership, which makes sense for the water, is what I'm thinking. And in the well application on Exhibit E, it says on the 18th, and there was agreement on that from Noel, that on behalf of the family trust, we support this drill replacement. So isn't there a due diligence that this new will has to be done to continue that partnership, that there's actual water? Just a question.
Are you talking about the partnership agreement of the older Daly Ranch? Okay, so be clear here. That partnership was the owner of the 225 acres. Not, that partnership did not cover the entire 275. That partnership was just from the 225. That later converted to an LLC, which we call the R.N. Daly Ranch LLC.
Okay.
Okay, so but those entities are really only the owners, managers of the 225 acres.
Okay, and in our application in 2018, that the water was shared though, correct?
It has been shared.
It has been
Absolutely. It's been absolutely shared. The property's been farmed jointly.
The reason why I
until
say
it-
that is because her signature is on that in confirmation that it was,
Yeah.
she approved that because.
Yeah, she
So I'm
did.
just having a hard time of why this well needs, why we wouldn't want to get this well going to make sure the land gets used.
Yeah,
I'm just questioning. Thank you.
Okay?
Thank
And I'll
you.
be available for any other comments or questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yes,
Can we take a quick break?
sure. We'll take a 10-minute break at this point. Thank you, everyone.
Are you flying over here? Are you flying over here?
You know, when I fly my little airplane, I can do that. When I fly my jets, I can't. I gotta go whoosh. You know, you get so used to that propeller in front of you, and when it's spinning, you
Yeah.
can't see it.
It's just,
And
yeah,
there-
it's
And
gone.
there are people that forget that and walk into it.
Oh my gosh. That's scary.
You're dead.
Yeah.
It's not even a debate. Well, I think we can re-put the head on.
Oh, it's just
And the
gross.
problem with the jet engine is,
Yeah.
that in fact, the 737's nickname is the Hoover.
Oh,
Because
sad.
the engines are so big
And it sucks
and so
everything in.
low, you have no idea. There, we had a case in El Paso, one of our airplanes was in El Paso, and they were trying to adjust something on the side of the airplane and had to run the airplane at essentially a little bit above idle, right? And the guy's baseball cap started to be sucked off, and he reached to grab the baseball cap. It sucked him into the engine.
Here we go. All right, it is 3:05. We are reconvening the hearing. At this time, we'll invite presentations by any other persons in favor of the appeal. Hearing none next, we'll move on to presentations by any other persons opposed to the appeal. I understand there's one person online that has requested an opportunity to be heard. Is that correct?
You also have somebody here.
Okay, did you want to?
Do you solemnly state that the evidence that you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
If that microphone's on, you need to speak louder. If it's not on, we need to get it turned on.
Okay, I'll do my best. So I am David Esquibius. I am the attorney for Noel Nottingham Daly in the probate action, the trust matters. It was my understanding that the water right attorney that I engaged, who was online, was going to speak first, but I'll go first. My hesitation is that I'm not a water right lawyer. So nevertheless, I want to make a few comments more as a person who is not only associated with the trust and estate litigation, but also a person who's just sitting out here in the audience listening to what is taking place today and what took place at the last hearing on this issue. And it's alarming to me. I hear that Mr. Arnold has asked this body, what are the duties and obligations? What are your duties and obligations? And one of the things that I find is that he is repeatedly asking for equitable relief from you. I'm not sure, I'm not aware that that this board is vested with equitable relief. It appears to me, as a layperson in this regard, that this board administers water allocation and not necessarily water rights. And I'm alarmed when I sit here and I listen to the disclosure that my client, Noel Nottingham Daly, in 2018, consented to the well of HO3, her neighbor that is alongside her own parcel needed water. And she consented to that use. She granted a temporary assignment of her water with her neighbor. And now I am hearing that, well, many years have gone by since Noel consented to her neighbor using her water. And because of that historical use, a right is somehow created and vested in that neighbor. And from what I'm hearing, maybe to the detriment of the original person granting that temporary assignment. I'm hearing, well, no, we'll allocate the water equitably between us. I live in Camarillo, and recently, after the fires, our electricity is turned off without warning, without notice. And my neighbor has installed solar electricity. And I sit here and I listen to what's happening today, and I think to myself, do I have a right to use my neighbor's solar power when my power goes out? Even if my neighbor had said to me in the past, hey, David, your power's out, I'm going to lend you some of mine. And my neighbor did so and lent it to me, and let's say for a number of years. And afterwards, I couldn't get power anymore on my own without the assistance of my neighbor. Do I now have a vested right to say to my neighbor, you must give me power? And the power that you do give me, I will equitably give it back to you. and I'll make sure that there is a fair allocation between your house and my house. And to me, that's what's being asked of this board, that Noelle, who graciously allowed her neighbor to use her well for the creation, her well HO2, for the creation of HO3. And yes, HO3 then became operative, and it then watered both parcels at a time when Noelle and her husband, Miss Poliquin's father, was alive, and they were jointly farming the property. They were getting along. And at some point, father died, and no longer was Noelle, unfortunately, getting along with her daughter. Unfortunately. And no longer is there a partnership, and no longer is there a joint venture, and no longer is there a common lessee between what we call P50, Miss Noelle's Nottingham's parcel, and P225, which is the Poliquin, the R&D parcel. So it is true that the P50 property currently does not have a tenant. It is currently not being farmed. It was farmed until January of 2025, jointly with P225, with Duda as our lessee. And from what I'm hearing today, for the first time, Duda became concerned that there was insufficient water to maintain both properties. And so Duda unilaterally decided it was not going to use Noelle's property anymore, but in fact it was now going to use Miss Poliquin's property, the R&D property. We didn't know that. All we know is no one renewed our lease. And we figured that out the week before the lease expired, because I reached out to Duda and said, hey, our lease expires next week. Are we going to renew it? No, we're not. We're going to use your neighbor's property. And by the way, can you still give us water? Well, the answer is no, because HO3 failed. HO3 on the R&D property failed. So HO2 grants a temporary assignment for the creation of HO3 so that the neighbor can have water, so that its neighbor can jointly water the properties. But when HO3 fails, R&D applies for HO4, asking P50, can I have your consent? Well, we've been actively litigating in probate court for 5 years. The answer is no. We will not give you our consent for many reasons that are not relevant at all. Because the bottom line is my client is the owner of HO2, and she can use her water how she wishes. She could share her water with the neighbor on the other side if she chooses. Or she can not share her water at all with anybody if she chooses. She's not compelled to share her water with anybody, nor is my neighbor compelled to share his electricity with me. I want to address a few points that have been raised today that I have not yet addressed. The R&D property is not fallow. It is currently being farmed by Duda. They are currently receiving water from an independent source. That much has been said today. What happens on P225 is not because of anything that P50 is failing to do. The suggestion that P50 is failing to do something suggests that P50 has an obligation to do something and is therefore breaching that obligation. But that's not the case here. P50 HO2 does not have an obligation to P225 HO3 or HO4, the creation of HO4. I hear Mr. Arnold telling this board that in his opinion, if you do not grant him the right to create HO4 at the expense of HO2 without HO2's consent, that this board would be abdicating its duty. And when I hear that, I think, well, that means that you have a duty to do what he's asking you. And if you don't do it, you abdicate that duty. But if you don't have the duty to do what he's asking, you can't abdicate. You can't abdicate a duty you don't have. And he seems to be suggesting you have a duty when, in my opinion, you don't. It is my understanding that historical allocation of water cannot be used for future allocation of water. That is my layperson understanding. I heard Mr. Arnold tell this board today that, in his opinion, the staff has failed to do something when HO3 failed. I'm not sure what he thinks the staff is required to do when a well fails. Staff is not obligated to drill a new well. Staff is not obligated to do anything at all. I heard some discussion about waiver and estoppel. In order for that to be true, there would have to be an agreement alleged by P225 that P50 agreed to water usage or water allocation in perpetuity, and that they then relied upon that and did something in furtherance of that reliance. And that's not the case, because all that was granted in this case in 2018 was a temporary assignment, which my understanding of the ordinance is that temporary assignment expires when HO3, the well, the replacement well, fails. And that means that that HO3 and P225 no longer have water allocation, and that the water allocation in its entirety remains vested with HO2, P50, Noel Nottingham Daly.
Council, let me ask, if from 2005 to 2014, was HO2 in service during those years?
I don't know.
And during those years, I guess, what wells were watering the collective 275 acres?
I would have to think that if HO2 gave rise to HO3, then HO2 was the well that was watering at least the 50 acres, and perhaps even the 225, but I'm not certain, because I do know from what I heard today from Mr. Arnold that the 225 acres does also receive water from Pleasant Valley.
Assume for me. By the way, let me just correct one.
I'm sure
Point
there's a
you
lot
made.
to correct what I said, because I'm just a layperson, basically.
When you said that it was the responsibility of this board to administer allocations, that's only partially true. It's the responsibility of this board to create allocations as well. And your point about historical use, indeed, the allocation ordinance that exists is 100% reliant on historical use. And my question, though, is if indeed and the historical base period used to calculate those allocations was 2005 to 2014. If indeed during those years, that single wellhead was used to service both respective parcels, is all that water actually P50's water?
From a layperson's perspective, I would think, yes, that's my water. And I was hearing some discussion today about, well, what if I have strawberries and what if I have trees? I don't know anything about growing, not a farmer, just a trust lawyer. But it sounds to me like there was some inference in that comment that some crop uses more water than another crop. And if there were to be this equitable allocation, as Mr. Arnold suggests and is asking this court, and this court, or I'm sorry, I'm used to saying court, this board, and this board were to grant that and split up the water as he suggests, pro rata, based on acreage, number one, that would mean that all acres are equal. Number two, that could deprive the original well holder, HO2, of the desire to change crops. Because if the water that was granted equitably between the two parcels was insufficient for the crop that she wants to grow, then she would be limited in what she could possibly farm on her property. And then that begs the question of, well, why would this landowner be limited? Because she originally was being generous to her neighbor, who's now claiming what sounds to me to be like a prescriptive easement, a taking of a right?
Well, let me ask you something also. In what Chair West is stating, it says in the appellant exhibit E on page 102 that HO2 was on both two irrigated parcels. And it was a total amount that they were provided. And then it gives you a table of estimated from 2002 to 2004 and what was reported from 2005 to 2017. So we have that information.
Is that, I got to be honest, I have no idea what you just said. But if I could try to interpret what you said, are you suggesting that there was some historical allocation 2 decades ago that may have some meaning and effect today?
Well, that's what it was in the application for the 2018 redrilling of the HO3.
But that
And it
application was not submitted
provided-
by my client.
Your client signed
Can't-
that was approved. So that's why that would be part of her understanding that information, historical data.
My understanding about historical use is that the emergency ordinance E doesn't allow historical allocation to be utilized as a factor. That's all I have to say unless you have questions for me.
I think you've heard all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No, I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Skouras, what's the status of the trust litigation?
Well, let me
And is there any end in sight? It's not
Yeah,
like the
let
question
me
compound.
break up that question because it was compound. So let me answer it. What is the status of the trust administration? The husband, Mr. Daly, when he passed, he created an irrevocable trust for the benefit of his wife for her lifetime. She is alive and doing well, and so that trust is administered year to year by their daughter, Ms. Poliquin. So year to year, the trustee will be accounting for the administration to my client, and that means year to year, my client gets to review that account and report and gets to comment and possibly even object. And if there's an objection, that means there's litigation in court. Litigation sometimes is a strong word. People think that the roof is on fire. It could mean that, but it could also just mean that there's a legal proceeding. There has been legal proceedings in the probate court since before the husband died, and there was hearings this morning. And there's likely to be appeals based on hearings this morning. And so the trust proceedings and or litigation is going to continue for the foreseeable future. And it could continue year to year.
Are the issues that we've discussed joined in those trust proceedings?
No, Mr. Arnold was accurate that the trust proceedings are basically limited to the disposition of property, real and personal, and not necessarily water allocation at all.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
But it could be, but it hasn't been yet.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Not suggesting it, I'm just asking, that's
Thank you. Anything else?
nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Hamilton?
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear?
Can barely hear you.
Can you turn his mic up?
And I'm getting a little back also, my speaker. Let me adjust my microphone.
Mr. Hamilton, can you turn your mic up or speak louder?
Can you hear me now?
You're very faint, sir. While you work on that, can I please swear you in?
Yes.
Do you solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
And I apologize for sound quality. You're having trouble hearing me. And I'm hearing a little bit of echo on my speaker. Mr. Eskeet going to go second the last minute to switch order and for housekeeping reason, which was to admit Mr. letter September 12th as an exhibit in this proceeding. So we'd like to do this now.
Is there an exhibit number to that?
That would be Exhibit S. So marked.
So Mr. Eskebius covered a lot of my points, probably better than I could. So I just want to clear up a few details.
Hold on 1 second, Brian.
Of course.
1 second.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, yeah, I think there's some confusion here. Mr. Conger, I think the September 24, 25 appeal hearing, item 19, the supplemental opposition exhibits, there is an Exhibit A, letter to the board dated September 12, 2025. I think that's what you're referring to. I think, Mr. Chair, what Mr. Hamilton, he was cutting out on us, but I think what he was asking is that that letter be admitted into evidence. But it's Exhibit A. I don't have any Exhibit S.
Yeah, I don't have an S. This will become Exhibit S.
Correct. That's what I was saying, yeah.
Any objection to admitting the letter? It'll be received and admitted. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
So there was some discussion about historical allocations, both by Mr. Arnold and Mr. Eskebius. This question before the board is not whether to reallocate water allocations under the ordinance. This is not a water rights proceeding. There's currently an adjudication. It's in trial today on the phase 1 issue, but it hasn't reached any proceeding on the merits of respective water rights claims. So it's premature for this board to consider how that adjudication might resolve to determine whether or not to allow this well application to move forward. Instead, it's quite simple, and one of the board members already mentioned section 2, which makes really clear what the board's discretion is here and what it needs to do, which is to deny the transfer absent consent from my client. Anything more than that, this appeals to quote-unquote equity is really an appeal to ask the board to act beyond its powers in a manner that's not contrary. I'm sorry, a manner that is contrary. And I don't want the board to commit that sort of legal error to solve a problem between two families, two neighbors. Mr. Arnold said that there was no response to his efforts to enter a well sharing agreement. That's actually not true. Me and Mr. Arnold have been in conversation. We haven't agreed to enter a well sharing agreement, which is our right. But that's much different than saying he's been ignored. And I imagine he is unsatisfied with the response, but that doesn't that doesn't exempt him from section 9.2 and the requirement to have our consent. Essentially, what he's asking for is to take from my client's hands the right to drill a well on its property so that he can do so on his property. And we'd be subject to whatever he determines or the client determines is fair and equitable. And that's simply not correct in the law. and the board shouldn't be used as a mechanism to resolve this dispute. I don't know if the board has further questions, like water rights questions. I think.
Counsel,
it
this
would
is
be a
not,
mistake.
this is not a hearing to determine water rights. This agency
Yeah,
has no interest in water rights. But let me disabuse you of an error that pervades your presentation, and that is that there is no relationship between water rights and allocations. The allocations this board assesses are independent of water rights. And you can litigate your water rights in the Superior Court, not here. But allocation decisions belong exclusively to this board.
And I don't disagree with that whatsoever. My point is that this hearing is not a hearing to determine allocations. That's not the questions before the board in this application. Instead, the board's being asked to take from my client its existing well rights, give it to RN Daily. Is there a question about how allocations should be resolved? Should the parties not reach some agreement? Sure, perhaps. But that's not right today, and doesn't justify the board allowing RN Daily Ranch to unilaterally take control of the well without following the proper rules and procedures. And I do agree with Mr. West with your characterization of FSCA's responsibilities and authorities with respect to allocation. What I'm saying is that allocations are not properly before you right now.
Any questions from anyone?
Just for the record, because the audio was so weak, can you make that last statement that you made, say it again? We're trying to hear you and read the transcript, but it's delayed. So just for my little pea brain, if you would repeat that last statement you made.
And I apologize for the sound quality. The question for the board today has to do with an application to drill a replacement well, which requires consent from my client. We have not given such consent. In fact, it wasn't prior to the application submitted. The question of how to resolve respective allocations in a world sharing a well is not words. That's not a question to answer today. But the board needs to just give the rights to R&D to resolve the for it.
Thank you. Anything further?
Only if you have more questions.
I'm not seeing any other questions, Brian. Thank you. We will
Thank you.
proceed next with any rebuttal that, did you have a question? We haven't gotten to that. We'll proceed next with any rebuttal that you wish to offer, Gary. I'm not sure that's on.
Yeah, turn up the, thanks, Gary.
Is it on now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Gary Arnold for the appellant. Three very short comments. In 2018, Noel signed the consent to drill HO3. Nowhere did it say that this was a temporary transfer or a temporary assignment of the allocation. It said, we support the drilling of HO3. Second, my client, RN Daily Ranch, paid 100% of the cost to drill HO3, to pump it, extract it, and use it, and gave the water to P50. Just to set the record straight. While I have used words like fairness and equity, and common sense in terms of the sharing of the water, I think what I'm really here is to say we're not after Noel's allocation. We're after our allocation, which is equal to 81.82% of the total. Noel can retain and reserve her 18.18% of the allocation, whether that's allocation is as granted by the FCGMA or as ultimately determined by the court. I'd also like to have the opportunity to introduce Alan Yoshitake, who is with us, who is the probate attorney for my client. And perhaps he can also confirm what the status of the probate litigation is, procedures, so just so you hear from our side as well to confirm what that status is.
Before we do that.
Sure.
Would, during that 2005 to 2014 base period, was a common crop grown across all those acres?
Absolutely. The property is and has been farmed jointly for 20, 25, 30 years, single tenant on the entire property, same cropping pattern, same utilization of water. There's been no difference, and that was, what I was trying to do is to establish that there was no different crops being grown on one part of the property versus another, so it's all commonality. It is 1 acre is the same as every other acre.
Thank you.
Okay, if I may call
course.
Mr. Yoshitake?
I'm sorry, I'm not, oh, I'm sorry.
May I swear you?
Sure.
Mr. Yoshitake, do you solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. My name's Alan Yoshitake. I'm with Safe Harbor Shaw. I head up their National Trust Estates group, and I represent the Daly family in the probate litigation matters. And I handled the conservatorship of Mr. Daly when he was alive. And so I have a longstanding history of this case that I hope some information that you would have or question you would have, I'm happy to answer. I would like to give you a little context of the case, that these two properties were farmed jointly together when Mr. Daly was alive, and he was a man's man. He would just be a farmer, he would farm it all, and he didn't really care 50 acres or 225 acres. It was 275 acres, it was his property, and that's the way he handled his life. I represent his daughter, Adele Poliquin, as owner of a great majority of his separate property, and Mr. Daly had tremendous separate property. And I think the conflict that you're hearing about in the litigation is because Noel has always wanted to control the entire separate property and community property. And Mr. Daly decided that that's not what he wanted. So Noel is angry that she can't control the 225. And yes, she's created litigation in the probate matter. There's been 7 or 8 petitions that we've handled, and the trustees has prevailed on all 7 or 8 petitions. They have not won one single petition because their petitions are frivolous and is just angry. This morning I was in probate court in front of Judge Lund, Department J6, here in the juvenile court, probate court. He granted all 4 accountings, all 4 petitions over vehement objections by Mr. Stevius. Judge Lund granted all 4. There are no issues in front of the probate court dealing with water allocation at all. So I'm surprised to hear comments that maybe this board would be overstepping any issues in a probate litigation matter. There are none. There has not been any. And the water allocation has not even been an issue in the probate. We've been just fighting about accountings and Mrs. Daly getting all the net income. And through the evidentiary process, she got all of her net income and more. And so this is a unfortunate family, a fractured family that mom is very angry, and she's using this process and her lack of consent for a water agreement, which we've been asking her to do a water agreement with us for a long time, and they refuse. And she feels that she's getting benefit by disagreeing with it. The irony here is that we're the trustees of the 225 acres. She's the income beneficiary under a Q-tip trust in this trust administration. This income benefits her, okay? All the rents from a tenant would benefit her. And we want to provide for her, and we want to give her the income of this legacy of this family. But she is unilaterally trying to stop the process, and in the process, not only harming her 50 acres, but harming the 225 acres that generates millions of dollars in revenue for her, and she's stopping it. That's how angry she is. And it's unfortunate, but that's just the reality of what we're dealing with. And I respect the lawyers and the concern of this governing body about the probate litigation, but I can only assure you in my not as long as 42 years, but in my 38 years as being a lawyer, heading up a national group, the administration is going extremely well, and we're on top of every issue. And there is no issue that we're not dealing with, and we've been successful every step of the way, and we believe we're going to continue to do so. So when I hear things of, oh, we're going to appeal, and you got lucky in court this morning, and that kind of thing, fine. We would just continue to do our business and do what's right for Mrs. Daly. That's our Q-tip beneficiary, and do what's right for the family. So let me conclude there, and then let me answer any questions that this board may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions? I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then we'll proceed next, I guess, some closing arguments by staff or agency counsel.
I think that she has some updates. May agency staff provide some clarification?
Uh,
I can't hear you from back there, Kathleen.
Yes, this time is for staff's rebuttal or staff's closing.
Kathleen, may I swear in?
Yes, please.
Do you solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. I would like to provide clarification. I was agency staff that processed the original well permit. It's in the agenda packet on supplemental information in Exhibit 4, and as well as the new application that was submitted. If you look at Exhibit 4, there's no page number on it, but under Condition 9, it was stated repeatedly that the agency did not provide allocation. The new well that was issued, HO3, that was drilled, was operated under efficiency allocation in accordance with Emergency Ordinance E and the allocation at the time. It did not require the allocation from HO2 because it was efficiency allocation. However, for Emergency Ordinance E, we had to declare that it was a replacement well and specify that it was a replacement well, designate what well it was replacing, because there was to be no new or increased use in groundwater in accordance with Article 4 of Emergency Ordinance E. So it was a replacement well. It operated with efficiency allocation up until the OPV allocation came into place. And that was when HO2 became relevant. So if you look at that, you can see in the staff report, you will notice that the well permit for HO3 to be drilled was to RND Camarillo Ranch Partnership. You will notice in that application package, Noel Daly signed it, but it was in accordance to that other party party. Since that time, when we processed 309, both parties had changed names and were, had a different identity. So it was as if there were two different new owners of the parcels. So we could not use Noel's original approval to drill H3 because it was to a different party that didn't exist, an old owner of the parcel, so it had new names. And then so both parties had changed. Noel's represented a different ownership, and so did the other party. But also, I wanted to let you know in Staff Exhibit 7, it's the additional reporting requirement. So it's in this supplemental information. You go to a page, and it's this particular page, if you look at it, it states that the larger parcel is, the parcels are receiving 423.380 acre-feet of water from Pleasant Valley County Water District. They specify the turnout as PC3. It is my understanding, and that the larger parcel is where the turnout is, and that is where the Pleasant Valley County Water District water is going to. So if you see that, they got 423 acre-feet, and that's reported. And then if you go to Exhibit 8, you will see that the larger parcel received 310 acre-feet, basically 311 acre-feet of Pleasant Valley County Water District, whereas the smaller parcel does not receive. Here on this statement package, it states that the 50 acres got 29 acre-feet, while the larger parcel got 310 acre-feet of water from Pleasant Valley County Water District. So in looking at a big picture of what water is used on what parcel, you have to take in all water supply accounting, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention. If you have any questions, I would be glad to answer them.
Quick question. So in 2018, when the HO2 fails and HO3 is drilled, we're under the IAI administration. So it's based
Yes.
on just the crop that's being grown. And so was there
That
ever?
is correct.
So was there ever, I mean, a need or a discussion to even talk about transferring water from the wellhead to the other wellhead? Or was it a moot point because we're under the IAI regiment?
There was, at the time, before Noel signed that a permission to drill, we received, and it was in this supplemental package, an email from her attorney at the time stating that they would sign and approve this H3 application because they were working on a well sharing agreement and they wanted to have it in place before they transferred allocation. And allocation for a long, long time has required that it's jointly signed off and applied for. And we have had the forms to apply for allocation transfers long before this application and the original application were submitted.
So then 2018, 2019, the process just kind of never is resolved, no well sharing application?
They have not informed the agency that there is a well sharing agreement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.
Just to add on to what Kathleen has been talking about, the email that was sent out, and at the same time, RN Daily staff acknowledged that the allocation remained with HO2 in an email, which is Staff Exhibit 3, where they wrote, this is from Beverly Gutierrez, where she says, the allocation of the RN Daily Ranch is on the destroyed well, HO2 with Comcode OPV PTR. The new well is with Comcode R&D CAM. Can you please combine both to R&D CAM? So they acknowledge that they knew that the allocation is with HO2 and not HO3. And also, if there has been talk of the agency did not correct the use that has been happening under that Comcode and creating an impression of saying that there was use that was happening. But if we look at Staff Exhibit 7, which is the semi-annual extraction statement, you will notice that when R&D CAM just had one well under that COM code, the allocation at the back of that on the second page shows that there was no allocation on that particular well. It did not have an allocation because it was just HO3. And there was an attempt to simply write what the allocation should be. So if you then turn to Staff Exhibit 8,
Which page, there's multiple pages in staff exhibit
7. Sorry, my mistake.
I can't see what's showing up here.
Okay, Staff Exhibit 7. Let's go to the first page.
Hold on. I'm gonna walk you through it, so my eyes will go where your eyes go. If you go to exhibit 7, on the bottom it says page 1 of 2. Which page are you on?
Page 2 of 2.
2 of 2, okay.
Yes.
All right, now I'm with you.
Okay, so you can see that kind of circled, highlighted yellow part. That's the part that I'm talking about. There's that extraction allocation, OB crop year extractions. Both of those are 0. That means this has no allocation, and they basically have they have no allocation under this particular statement. However, you can correct that by simply having both of these wells under the same COM code. And so what I'm now directing you to is Exhibit 8. When you're looking at Exhibit 8, on the second page, page 2.
Of 8.
2 or 4. Yeah, of Exhibit 8.
Exhibit 8, 2 of 4, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. You guys can go through this very fast, but you can outpace my ability to follow you, so thank you for that. 2 of 4.
Yes. So now you see that it shows an initial extraction allocation of 308.627, and that is only because you now have destroyed well HO2 on that statement. So this basically demonstrates that the COM code on its own without HO2, HO3 does not have an allocation. The only way that that COM code has an allocation is if you combine the two for them to appear under the same COM code. And this basically makes it easier to manage while you're waiting for that well sharing agreement that P50 was waiting for before the transfer comes into effect. And that is essentially what staff was waiting for. As far as staff is concerned, staff did not get that well sharing agreement. The OPV ordinance code under section 9.2 says that it has to be submitted jointly. And at the same time, the agency ordinance code in section 5.3.5 also talks about a joint application for that. And if you have a well sharing also says, if I can read, requests for the transfer of allocations shall be submitted jointly by the parties involved and shall include the specific details of their proposal. Staff did not get that. And so it's not like staff looked the other way. We did not get the documentation required for us to be able to process that transfer. And so when HO3 failed, HO3 did not have an allocation, and it is very difficult for staff to process that looking at the agency ordinance code and the OPV allocation ordinance. To be consistent with that, we need to make sure we have the right paperwork. It's a very simple thing that I can see from my perspective. All we need is that shared well agreement. If that comes our way, we can process that today, but we don't have that. And with that, I'll take any questions.
But with the bill, they paid it, and every bill was paid, correct?
They have been paying because this goes to the operator, and so it's just receiving the statement doesn't necessarily mean that you're the owner.
Thank you, Farah.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes the testimony portion. We'll return this to the board for discussion and decision. Let me jump in. I think the staff made the only decision they can make, but I think this board has more options. Staff doesn't have the discretion this board has. However, the problem arose, interfamily dispute, the problem seems to me to be a consequence of the wellhead-based allocation system, which is a problem we get to remedy if we choose to. The evidence tells us that the allocation that the 275 acres has was based on the common use of all of those acres for the same purpose, growing the same crops during the allocation base period. Wouldn't seem to me to be unfair to then, under those circumstances, say, to apportion it out and to tell, to revise the allocation to HO2 and say it's now 18%, 19%, whatever that percentage is, and the balance of that allocation belongs to HO3 or any replacement well for HO3, that would yield no net increase of demand upon the basin, and it would not affect anybody's water rights. They can go litigate those, but in terms of the utility of the property, that would allow each of those parcels access to the water that they'd used previously so that they might be able to use that in the future. That is a resolution that I could support. I understand that I agree with staff, there is no well sharing agreement. I might even be inclined, though, to imply a well sharing agreement based upon the combined use of the property and that well during those many years it was in operation. And again, imply the well sharing agreement on that basis, based on that conduct. Let me just throw that out there as a concept and see if there's any agreement or disagreement, or what other suggestions anybody might have.
Based on past history of the allocations, I would definitely agree on that. I think that that's where we need to go forward. One, I can't stand fallow land. Two, they've been.
It's not foul.
Not foul, sorry.
Don't say that.
Thank you. But I don't, but it's not. I do agree in the comments you're talking about in splitting those. But then would that then, the approval of the HO4?
So my comment, my comment is that this is a mess. This is a mess that's been handed into our lap by parties that can't seem to come to an agreement. Now it's dumped on us. We didn't create this problem. We've created a series of rules and procedures to track this information, to try to be fair and equitable. And at the current time, we have a massive lawsuit that we've been dealing with for the last 4 years. And I'm a firm believer of be careful of what you wish for and be careful of unintended consequences. And right now, we are in court in Santa Barbara. It was this morning on this litigation. I don't have any idea if this has an effect or no effect, but I know right now this agency has been under litigation for 4 years over the way it's managed its business. And I am really reluctant to jump into another area of trying to solve a family dispute, which in my opinion, that's what it is, with tenants. And I don't, I think you could rationalize any way you want a solution to this problem, and you have no guarantee, I have no guarantee that it will not create unintended consequences, and here we go again. And so I don't know the solution to the problem. What I'm not comfortable is trying to rationalize in logical sense, and I think the arguments that we've made are logical, but right now, with the position we're in as an agency, and I am not supportive of trying to use a Rube Goldberg solution to a problem that we did not create and get a problem that we did create. That's my fear. And I understand your frustration. There's no question about it. I understand trust issues because I live in trust issues with our family. Thank goodness we're not in these kinds of fights. So, I think, I really believe that there's got to be a way, a logical, fair way, to either have clear, unequivocal authority that we have the right to intervene, which I don't think we have, that clear authority, or number two, get this agreement that would solve this problem. I think the evidence is overwhelming that these two parties have worked together, and for whatever reason right now, they're not working together, and the solution is to dump it on our lap, and I'm not comfortable with it in the middle of our lap. I think this is a slippery slope that I will not go, and hence I do not support I support the current position that we take a negative position on the request. That's where my position is.
These are the easy ones, I guess. So, I guess where I'm kind of leaning is, at face value, well 2 fails, they replace it with well 3, and now they're requesting to replace a failed well, and that's what this permit application is. I don't think that necessarily we need to answer the allocation question or transfer. And so maybe if it's within the bounds of what we can do, we can say, we're going to allow the well to be drilled as a replacement for well 3, which has been operating for the last 6 years. The allocation will kind of be an unresolved question, but within the COM code, and we can throw a caveat that says, you have to continue delivering water as you historically had been. I know that this is kind of a rat's nest and a challenge, but that would be kind of more the direction I would suggest.
So, first of all, I want to thank Gary. I want to thank Mr. Arnold. I know I lodged some tough questions with you. I want to thank Mr. Yoshitake, Mr. Asclepius, and everybody who testified. I appreciate it, and I don't doubt anyone's good faith. As Director Malhart said, this board has basically been thrust into a family dispute, and I agree with Director Malhart. I think we should affirm the interim executive officer's denial, and I'll explain why. First of all, and I'm going to make some specific references to the staff reports. On packet page 96 of 157, there is a specific concern by staff that if we were to do anything other than affirm the denial of the appeal, we may be putting ourselves into litigation. And I'm not taking that lightly, given the last 4 years of last 4, well, it's more than that, years of adjudication, both here, both in OPV and Las Posas. Number two, I think the articulation of the issues provided by the interim executive officer on packet pages 101 and 102 of 157 respectively was the correct reading of Ordinance E and the correct reading of 9.2. Where RN Daly wants us to go to, we would have to expressly ignore, thumb our nose at what our ordinance says. And I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not questioning anybody's good faith. I understand it's a family dispute, but it would require us to basically thumb our nose at what has been established in the plain language of the ordinance. I fully respect and I want the land to be farmed, but the evidence of what I heard today is, A, the land is getting farmed, P220, I'll just refer to it as P225, is being used, it's being supplied with water by the Pleasant Valley County Water District, and apparently DUDA is farming that land. So the question I ask myself is then, what is the prejudice to RN Daly if the interim, if the denial of the appeal is affirmed by this board? I don't see the prejudice. Ultimately, this may end up being resolved in the probate estate court, excuse me, Judge Lund's court. You can tell I'm not a trust lawyer. So, but it may ultimately be decided upon in the court. And the question is, even if you were to argue that we somehow have that authority, why should we do that in this instance? Especially in the absence of a well-sharing agreement. And I'm not casting aspersions on anyone. I know parties are operating in good faith, but there is an absence of a well-sharing agreement. It's basically trust us to do what's right. So in light of all of those reasons, I agree with Director Mulhart. My vote is unchanged from whenever we looked at this last time. Was it July, June? Anyway. I would vote to affirm the interim EXO's denial of the allocation.
One of the options that was discussed briefly the last time this came up was the option of actually approving drilling the replacement well, conditioned to presentation of a well sharing agreement or an allocation transfer agreement signed by all the respective parties. I guess that's another option. It would do what staff says they need. It would still give the applicant a chance to drill the well if they can arrange those agreements. I don't know if that solves anything or just defers the problem to another day, but.
Well, Mr. Chair, let me ask counsel. Let's hypothetically going with that construct, Jason. That would cure the issues under 9.2, correct? Because in that sense, in that event, in that circumstance, you'd have a well sharing agreement, a WSA, agreed upon by both sides, and in effect a joint application, right?
That's correct. It ultimately will depend on the well sharing agreement, excuse me, and the specifics included in there. But as you heard staff say previously, if we get a well sharing agreement, we've got consent from both parties and we satisfy that provision that you just referenced.
I think what I heard you say is yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you.
But if you don't mind, if I could just take a moment, I just want to read that provision. This provision is the standard for the executive officer's approval of a transfer of allocation. It appears not only in 9.2 2 of the OPV allocation ordinance, but in the previous versions of our larger ordinance, the agency ordinance code, and it reads, requests for the transfer or temporary assignment of extraction allocations shall be submitted jointly by the operators and owners involved and shall include the specific details of their proposal. I agree with you. If we had a well sharing agreement executed by both parties involved in this case that included the specific details of their proposal, which I assume a well sharing agreement would do, that provision would be satisfied. In the absence of it, I'm afraid it is not.
So I think the linchpin in this thing is a well sharing agreement. The cost of drilling a well in today's market is unbelievably expensive, and there's no guarantee that you'll get a valid well. And if I was in that position, there's no way I'd ever drill a well unless I knew I had a source of water there, or the right to have it. So I think it's logically a step towards, but it doesn't become effective until you have the well sharing agreement. I think the well sharing agreement is the crux of it. So I'm still not. I still agree with you that I do not support undoing the staff's finding and the negative. I'm trying to figure out if I'm saying a positive on a negative or a negative on a positive, but I think it falls into the category of somehow, some way. I don't know how you get it, but if you had a well sharing agreement, I think this problem goes away very quickly. We've heard that from staff, and I'm not comfortable of us as an agency bending the rules to make sausage when the simple solution is forget about the sausage, just get a well sharing agreement. And I think that's the slippery slope I don't want to go down. And given, as I said, given the lawsuit that we've been dealing with and the unpredictability of where that is going to wind up, I mean, I've said it before, if we do not solve this lawsuit on the Oxnard Plain, we're going to look at, and this is the attorneys telling me, close to $100 million lawsuit that's not settled. And right now, I heard we've passed the $25 million, $30 million mark already. So I don't want to be blamed for prolonging a lawsuit, but by going off and creating rules to satisfy one entity. That ground is not fallow. It's getting water from PV. PV delivers water to all kinds of folks. And so it's not about the land, it's about that piece of paper, that agreement. And once that agreement is done, then that owner of that property can drill a well and have usage of that water. And that's why I have to vote the way I vote.
I think this is a problem that we're partially responsible for. And I say that only because the construct of the allocation ordinance assigns the allocation to the wellhead irrespective of how that resource is being used. It's probably surprising that this is the first time this issue has arisen when you had a single wellhead serving multiple properties and then irreconcilable differences between the two owners. I would have thought that would have occurred before. Indeed, a well-sharing agreement is the divorce settlement agreement, but in the absence of a settlement agreement, what authority is it that decides the allocation of that resource? And I submit to you, it's us. And that's what's being asked of here. Now, whether we realign the allocations between the respective parcels, whether we do as Michael suggested, just go ahead and say we'll consider HO4 replacement for HO3 and require that the status quo be preserved. I think that would be another way of accomplishing the same thing. It certainly points out a need perhaps for a revision to the ordinance code in the future, so there's a mechanism by which it's clear that this agency can recast the allocation of a single wellhead among multiple parcel owners. It doesn't exist now, but it may be something we need to look at in the future. But to resolve this, I think that I'd be happy with either one of those approaches, either realigning the allocations or deeming HO4 to be a replacement for HO3 and condition that on the use of the water from HO4 in the same manner as HO3 was used previously.
I'm okay with that.
I'll voice my opinion. Historically, as the only member as a member of a farming family that's been on the Oxnard Plain for a long time, wells have been operated on a single well has operated on multiple parcels for as long as I've been alive. Our well on our property, one well, took care of my dad's property, two of my uncle's property, and two of my aunt's property. My dad farmed it. This has been going on a long time. What's changed? We created the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency as a solution to an overdraft problem that has been historic on the Oxnard Plain that we've tried to solve for years. And in the process of doing that, we've had to build agencies that have brought new water in. We've had to create new rules and regulations to solve problems. The problem we're having here today has nothing to do with how we've operated in the past. It has everything to do with a family that's having a trust fight. And I'm not willing to take my vote and deal with a really complicated agency that is facing a lawsuit, that is facing other lawsuits, and is turning to and representing an agency whose responsibility is to recharge those aquifers and is going to reach out to the growers, the pumpers, the cities, everybody. And you're going to have to pay fees to pay for these federally mandated projects that we're facing. And then doctor the inside of what we're doing at the GMA to solve a specific problem right now, I think is short-sightedness. I'd love to solve the problem. I'd love to solve the problem today. But the fact of the matter is we can't, because we've agreed you can't get on the airplane without a ticket, right? The wimpy school of hamburgers doesn't work. I'll gladly have a cheeseburger today for a payment in next Thursday. That's the wimpy school of economics. We don't operate under that, and we ought not to be doing that as an agency. The rules are the rules. I didn't create them. We created them collectively. I didn't create the scenarios that we have now. People will have all kinds of scenarios. We need to have an agreement. If we had that well-sharing agreement, we'll be fine. We came up with COM codes, and we've allowed a COM codes now to have multiple parcels that are under COM codes. Duda operates multiple parcels that have multiple COM codes tied to it, and we haven't even addressed how that has gotten out of control. And then we're going to agree to this, that yes, we'll come up with a new procedure to deal with one parcel that has a multiple, that is made up of two COM codes to solve that particular individual's problem when we didn't create it. And it can be solved if we had that agreement. I agree with you, your frustration. I don't know how you do it, but I am not willing to Rube Goldberg this agency once again to create another unintended consequence. So I am adamant about this, and so I am locked into my position.
Can I just say a couple things before, just to make sure your board is aware of at least all of council's opinion? If your board decides to reverse the interim executive officer's denial in the absence of, let's just call it a well-sharing agreement, or at least a joint application, in the face of our ordinance that says what it says, I do feel you expose yourself to liability with respect to a petition for writ of mandate. It is acting in contrary to our own laws or any law does expose us to that type of liability. Just want to make sure you're aware of that. Ordinarily, I would like to prefer to have that conversation in closed session. We don't have that luxury today. Second of all, I am concerned about the precedent that this sets for this agency. There are laws on the books, there are ordinances, there are provisions, there are standards, there are rules and requirements. It seems today to me that we are not following them for a particular reason. And I ask how a rule like this, or how your precedent today might be applied in the future when a similar or dissimilar, even maybe a completely different situation comes to your board for decision, and they bring up oh, remember on September 24th, 2025, you guys decided not to. I raised that point just to make sure that you guys are aware of the precedent that this may establish.
All right, in order to move this along, I'll make a motion and see where we go. And the motion would be to reverse the decision of the interim executive officer and approve drilling a replacement well conditionally, subject to production of a well sharing agreement and/or an allocation transfer agreement signed by P50 and P225.
So what I would ask, because we've got so many positive and negatives in that statement, I'd like you to break that down.
Sure.
And I think it's easier for me to follow the logic because there's some things I like and there's some things I don't like, and I want to make sure I'm not twisting myself into a position I don't want to be in.
What we're being asked to do is affirm or reverse the decision of the interim executive officer, which was to deny. In the construct that I've provided, we're reversing that decision, authorizing the drilling of the well, subject to and conditioned upon production of a well sharing agreement and/or an allocation transfer agreement. If there's an allocation transfer agreement, we don't need a well sharing agreement, because part of that allocation would then go to the new well, subject to the production of one of those two.
So a yes vote would
allow
would undo our previous ruling, subject to the things you outline, and nothing will happen until all of those criteria are met.
Correct.
Council, make your comment.
Council would draft the order.
Well, I understand that, but would that change your opinion that we are not going out on the limb and doing things that are we under the chair's recommendation? One could argue that what he's doing is he's outlining publicly a solution to a problem that satisfies our requirements that you just talked about and the problems that the litigants have raised. Is that a true statement?
Again, many different sentences compounded there. I apologize. I will say it this way. If your board were to reverse the interim executive officer's decision and condition it with a number of conditions, I still don't think that satisfies the standard in the ordinance. The decision in front of your board is whether to affirm or reverse. The underlying decision is a denial. Anything other than affirming that denial would be a reversal. And a reversal would have to be based on something in the ordinance, and I don't see that just yet. If your board's decision is to come back to us with a well sharing agreement, my recommendation would be to deny and direct the parties to come back with a well sharing agreement. At which point, staff has indicated that would be sufficient to, in fact, process the application as according to the parties' wishes. So that would be my recommended action, would be to deny with direction for the parties to return with a well sharing agreement. If they can't, they can't. But in order to approve or to, but the standard requires for a transfer of allocation to be supported by both parties. And in this particular case, we do not have that.
All right, so
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I don't know, have you already, you've already provided a motion.
I've already provided a motion.
I'm just trying to figure out from a procedural standpoint where we are.
Question
Was
would
that
be then,
motion?
there has been no
There's
second
been no
yet to the
second
motion.
of that one. And we have an alternative motion that Mr. Conger has articulated, which is to deny the appeal, which is affirming the decision of the interim executive officer and direct the parties to come back with a well sharing agreement.
Does that include, does that have added costs that they have to pay for? I'd like to know.
I think
For a
from
whole
I don't,
new application and doing all this different stuff?
no, I think that we would process it with, based as, if we were to get a well sharing agreement, it would be added to the file and then reviewed without, with the need for further, a further application fee.
Mr. Chair, I should let you fare whether you got a second to yours. If there is no
Let's-
second, I'll make
one thing
the
at a time.
alternative motion. One thing at a time.
All right, so again, I made a motion to reverse the interim executive officer's determination, subject to the conditions I outlined. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion before we put that motion to a vote? All right, let's have a roll call on that, please.
no, wait. Repeat the motion again. It's that big,
Motion is
long
to-
one that you had.
Motion's to reverse the
Yeah, okay,
decision
okay.
of the
All right, I'm with you
interim
now.
executive officer, approve the application to drill the well, subject to the condition being they provide either a well sharing agreement or an allocation transfer agreement.
Okay. This is the one that council said he's not comfortable with.
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm ready to vote.
Director Cravioto,
Yes.
Director Tremblay,
No.
Director Long,
Yes?
Director Mulhart,
No.
Chair West.
Yes. All right, that concludes the business of this hearing. We have a closed session scheduled. We will recess to closed session after inviting any members of the public who wish to comment on the subject matter, the litigation subjects that were noticed for closed hearing. Hearing none, we will be in recess for that closed session. I don't know, is there any reportable action likely?
No, we'll adjourn from.
We'll adjourn from closed session. Great, thank you. Thank you all.
Okay. Good luck in your traffic.
I thought I'd be there by now.